one blessed by the gods, is about to be born. This was the announcement made the day the Lilo family welcomed twin daughters into the world. Nosha's younger sister proved worthy of the reverence, blossoming into a girl with shimmering silver hair and a perpetually elegant smile. From a young age, she displayed a remarkable ability to manipulate and wield water, commanding it with effortless grace. Everyone called Nosha the one blessed by the goddess of love. However, the older sister, Nasia, with her raven-black hair, seemed perpetually shrouded in a cloud of dust and misfortune. Whenever she appeared in public, she became the subject of whispers and hushed gossip. What's with that gloomy face? I've never seen her smile. Furthermore, her younger sister effortlessly wielded abilities that Nasia, to this day, had yet to manifest. They were twins, yet how could they be so different? One, flawless, as if blessed by every deity, while the other was subjected to the judging, disdainful gazes of everyone around her. The sharp words of two noble women cut through the air, each syllable a stinging blow to Nasia's pride. She hadn't expected to hear such things, especially not at the Crown Prince's birthday banquet. Everyone present seemed to revel in Nasia's perceived shortcomings. The younger sister possessed everything, while the elder had nothing. The story had become a running joke amongst the noble families, a source of amusement whispered over teacups and behind fans. If Nasia couldn't bear the incessant whispers and chose to flee, the others would erupt in even louder laughter, mocking her retreat. Nasia's grip tightened around her wine glass. Then, with a sudden, sharp movement, she hurled it to the ground, stunning everyone into silence. But today was different. She feigned innocence. "Oh dear, how clumsy of me." Putting on a friendly, guileless expression, she turned towards the young woman who had been speaking ill of her. "You were talking about me just now, weren't you? I didn't quite catch what you said. Would you mind repeating it?" The girl, who moments before had been so haughty, now cowered under Nasia's gaze. I didn't say anything." Nasia took a step forward, grinding her shoe into the shattered glass, a silent warning. "I heard someone say something about how some people seem to be blessed by all the gods, while others aren't. Is that right? And that it somehow concerns me." The girl's eyes darted nervously. "I just meant it's the natural order of things." At these words, a radiant smile spread across Nasia's face. "I don't recall giving you permission to interject, so would you please refrain from uttering such shameless nonsense?" The gentle words were a prelude to the storm that followed. Her voice rang out, sharp and clear. "From now on, listen closely. If anyone dares to gossip about me behind my back, whoever it may be, I will tear their mouth apart." She swore to herself. Never again would she be a doormat. At first, I didn't realize this was a world inside a book. My most vivid memory from my past life was quitting a tedious job and embarking on a long-awaited journey. However, on the flight to my destination, shortly after takeoff, the plane exploded. In that moment, I knew I was going to die. She was brought to a strange, unfamiliar place, surrounded by anxious voices calling out to her, "Miss, wake up! Open your eyes!" When I opened my eyes, I found myself in another world, another life, another person. She struggled to piece together who Nasia was. The physician diagnosed her fall from a horse. How fortunate! She sat there, lost in thought, but not entirely unconscious. "My name is Nasia. My sister's name is Nosha." She said, "Our family is the Lilo family." Her eyes held a flicker of something unreadable. A memory surfaced, a book titled The Favored Goddess. The novel, immensely popular, told the story of two starkly different twin sisters, particularly how the older sister, Nasia, lacked anything special, especially when compared to Nosha, beloved by all. Nasia was always timid, and, as time passed, I found myself yearning for everything Nosha possessed. Why did the gods give everything to Nosha? Why do I have nothing? If only I had been born as Nosha. If only I had been born as Nosha. That's right. Nasia is the villainess in the novel The Favored Goddess. "So, your name is Nasia, is it?" She clenched her fists, surprised at her own reaction. Perhaps because I've read so many fantasy novels, this isn't as shocking as I thought it would be. She admired her beauty in the mirror. "Besides, I've become a noble, haven't I?" She quickly accepted reality. "I'm already dead. There's no way to go back to the past." But that was all right, because she had been born into a loveless environment in her previous life, suffering every day. Besides, the current situation isn't so bad. She tried on expensive dresses, each one looking stunning on her. The Natia in the novel always compared herself to Nosha, and while she was constantly preparing for her descent into hell, she seemed to have become a narcissist as she continuously looked in the mirror, thinking to herself, could I be any more beautiful? It's not me. You're the one enjoying your meals without having to maintain an image. Her appearance, personality, and abilities weren't lacking. Before long, young, rich, and beautiful, she should have been indulging in the luxuries she couldn't attain in her past life. But happiness couldn't last forever. One afternoon, she sipped tea while jotting something down. Plan a trip. Two maids whispered behind her back. Miss Natia seems a bit strange lately, doesn't she? Oh yes, ever since that horse-riding accident. Victory turned to her friend and asked, really? Have you heard about that incident? She looked puzzled, as if she didn't quite understand. Victory quickly explained, I mean, people keep disappearing. I heard it's because of human weapon experiments. So, that incident happened in the Kali Empire, right? Hearing these words, Natia was startled, spitting out a mouthful of water. Victory rushed over in a fright, asking, are you all right, miss? She quickly dabbed at the stain on her lips with a cloth, replying, I'm fine, continue. You were saying you went to the Kali Empire, and then? Victory was terrified, her face pale. That incident, rumors have been circulating around the world recently. In my humble opinion, they are conducting human weapon experiments in the Kali Empire. More people have gone missing this year than last. They also say everything is being taken to the Kali Empire, but it's all just rumors, so don't worry too much about it, Mississippi. Natia muttered in exasperation. Oh my God, the Akan Empire, the setting of the favored goddess, waged war against the Kurua Empire. The problem is, after losing that war, Natia dies. The character Natia dies, and the ultimate secret of the novel lies with Akan, a victim of human weapon experimentation who, after surviving the experiments, becomes the most powerful being in the world, but also a monster. She forced herself to calm down. Stay calm, there's still time. Akan escaped from the lab when he was 15. Though he was mistaken for a slave due to his ragged clothes and sold to the Akan Empire, from these facts, she could already guess. There's that moment because Natia and Akan are the same age, so if they're 15, that means it happens this year. She quickly stood up and asked the maid, where is the slave market in the capital? Victory? I need to go there right now. The maid asked back with a puzzled look. What? The slave market? Why would Miss want to go there? Natia suddenly urged. There's no time to hesitate. Prepare the carriage for me now. Suddenly, a young man outside started knocking on her door. Excuse me, master. She turned her head towards the door and said, come in. A young man in worn-out clothes slowly opened the door and said, I have prepared the bathwater, as instructed. She stood there, staring at him blankly. This person seemed to evoke a strange sense of familiarity. That jet black hair, those deep, abyss-like eyes, the ancient tattoos. She pointed at him uncertainly and asked, what's your name? The man replied, my name is Akan. Stunned by this shocking revelation, she froze for a few seconds. Wait, why is Akan here? Why is he in my house? There's no such plot in the original story. It was mentioned in the favored goddess that Akan escaped from the laboratory, but it didn't explain the time he spent as a slave of the Lilo family. However, the favored goddess wasn't a perfect novel. There might be some undeveloped elements. I was thinking about looking for Akan, but he appeared before me just like that. Should I be happy? Suddenly, someone called her master. Akan asked, if there's nothing else, may I go back now? She awkwardly replied, yes. He bowed politely to her and then turned to leave. She watched him with a puzzled expression. What just happened? The way he went out, it was like he was running away. Victory, who was standing behind her, anxiously asked, Miss, are you just going to let him go like that? Natia turned around and asked, what do you mean? She quickly changed her tone and replied, oh, it's nothing. Since I saw you let him leave earlier than usual, I'm not too sure. Natia listened, growing more and more perplexed. Earlier than usual? Did I do something before I was possessed by this body? She pretended to ask the maid, after the horse-riding accident, what was I usually like? My recent memories are quite blurry, seeing that the two seemed afraid. She said, no matter what you say, I won't be angry, so please tell me the truth. It's the only way to help me regain my memories. Victory started to tremble. The thing is, Miss hated Akan from the very beginning. Miss often said she didn't want to see yet. Can's black hair. Just turn on the faucet and the bathwater will come out, but Miss made him fetch the water directly every day. When Miss was in a bad mood, she often whipped Atkin with a whip and bones. Hearing this, Tanasia was stunned, unable to believe she had done such cruel things in the past. This is a sign of cancellation, right? Atkin resents me and send me away, which is only natural. She suddenly remembered. Wait, wasn't sending Atkin to the Kurwa Empire actually my idea? Although in the original story, Atkin escaped from the laboratory in the Kali Empire and moved to the Akin Empire for some reason, he was captured again. I don't quite remember why, but judging from the current situation, if this is related to that incident, then it's really over. She asked Trey, is the schedule for visiting the slave market tomorrow arranged? She flatly refused. No, the slave market is canceled. She thought to herself, I can't give up this life here. No matter what, I have to find a way out. That night, immersed in the world of the book, I dreamt for the first time. It was a dream where I found Atkin at the slave market. He was locked in a crowded cell. I realized that all the ancient texts were carved on his neck. Not only that, but dozens of magic formulas were also carved on Atkin's body. That's to turn him into a human weapon. These are the results of experiments forcibly carved onto him. They gave an ordinary person special abilities. I might also have the power like Nosha, using water abilities. That's Nosha's domain, something I can never surpass. If I can unravel the secrets of the ancient texts and magic spells carved on Atkin, I still think I might be able to use this ability. So I started studying Atkin through confrontation. Because it was unjust, all the truth was completely concealed by him. The first thing I did was figure out what his abilities were. She grabbed the rope in her hand and lashed it hard against his stomach. You can't escape. Looking at the spells carved on you, I know you were never an ordinary person, right? Let me see your hidden potential. Atkin looked up at her, but refused to say a word. Tanasia asked with a wicked smile, are you planning to remain silent until the very end? So she kept hitting him to vent her anger. Tanasia wielded the whip with precision, as if playing with a pet. She gripped the handle tightly. Mercilessly, Tanasia whipped Atkin, leaving his body covered in wounds. After tormenting him for a while, she too began to feel exhausted. She walked over to him, touched his wounds with her hand, and softly asked, is that it? The potential to be completely immune to damage? If so, even if I face dozens or hundreds of people alone, no matter how they attack, I won't die, and my body won't be harmed. So, let's see how long you can last in your iron-like state. Sweat poured down Atkin's body like rain. He no longer had the strength to speak. Tanasia tightly closed her eyes, the inner self within her constantly urging her to stop. I just want to wake up, but she still ruthlessly beat and tortured Atkin. He just gritted his teeth, enduring the burning pain. A desperate cry echoed once again in Tnasia's mind. Stop! Stop it now! Her eyes shot open as if she had woken up. It turned out to be just a dream. She was panting, drenched in sweat. Tanasia abruptly sat up and then reflected worriedly. This wasn't just an ordinary dream. It was clearly a memory from before I possessed this body. I not only tortured Atkin, but also tried experiments like those of the Kali Empire. If the story continues down this path, it's highly likely that I, someone who knows Atkin's identity, will sell him to the Kali Empire. If it goes on like this, I will be subjected to Atkin's revenge. I have to find a way to resolve his resentment. Early the next morning, she personally went down to the servants' quarters to find him. Tanasia froze, calling out, Atkin. He was in his room, wiping his sweat with a towel. As soon as he saw her, he asked, what brings you here? Do you have any orders, master? His words made her feel a little uneasy at first. It wasn't clear before, but he's wary of me now. Yes, even now, he's still being bullied, so it's normal. From now on, things will be different. She sighed and replied, nothing in particular. I'll move your quarters inside the mansion. Not this small, dark room, but a cleaner place. I can look somewhat dubious. Move to a new place? I don't understand what Master is saying. She also enthusiastically explained, I mean, from now on, you don't have to worry about anything. The Favored Goddess isn't a perfect novel, so I think I'll change it in the direction I want. Tanasia confidently folded her arms and declared, Atkin, from now on, you will be my personal assistant. He was completely taken aback by the young lady's decision. She silently made up her mind. No matter what, she would achieve a happy ending. After hearing Tnasia's request, Atkin was stunned for 3 seconds, speechless. Then his face darkened, clearly showing discomfort. Seeing this, Tanasia felt uneasy, thinking, I guess I can no longer hide my displeasure. She hesitated again, whether to keep a secret, but then Tanasia realized that the reason Atkins' expression was so unpleasant was because he had to stay with a fierce and cruel master. She also told herself that, even so, he shouldn't disobey her words. Tanasia gestured to him, saying, pack your things and leave this place. Atkin replied after hearing her, understand. While he was busy packing, Tanasia just stood by silently, thinking, even if she didn't like it, she had to do this. She was thinking about keeping him by her side and atoning for the wrongs Tanasia had committed before. She firmly clenched her fists. I'll do my best until I don't even remember the resentment in my heart. Suddenly, Atkin spoke. Master, I'm done packing. Seeing this, Tanasia was also surprised. Already finished? She looked at the single bag he was holding, thinking, is that all? But he simply replied calmly, yes. Seeing this, Tanasia hesitantly asked, do you wear the same clothes in winter too? Atkin indifferently replied, yes. At this thought, she immediately pictured him huddled in his thin clothing, wearing the same outfit all year round, sitting alone in the desolate snow. So, Tanasia immediately waved to a nearby servant. This won't do. We'll go pick out some suitable clothes first. Call the tailor for me. The maid behind her quickly complied. Seeing this, Atkin immediately interjected, I'm fine, there's no need. However, Tanasia ignored his words and coldly replied, no, I can't accept my servant. Looking so shabby, she continued, from now on, don't call me master anymore. Call me miss, understood? A little while later, in the main hall, Tanasia clapped her hands to get everyone's attention and then announced loudly that, from today onwards, Atkin would be her personal attendant. Hearing this, the servants worriedly thought to themselves that the young lady had decided to find someone close to her to torment. All three of them were filled with apprehension, their faces clearly showing their unease, which made it easy for Tanasia to see through their thoughts. She thought to herself that, contrary to everyone's worries, she would treat Atkin well to ensure a happy ending. Then, the tailor began to take Atkin's measurements and redesign his clothes, while Tanasia leisurely sipped tea and read a book. Suddenly, a servant's voice rang out, Miss, I'll take you to see him try on the clothes. At this, Tanasia looked up and the curtains slowly drew open. When Atkin walked out, the two maids behind him were stunned. Their eyes widened, and their mouths gaped open as if they couldn't believe what they were seeing. At this moment, he seemed to have transformed into a gentle and refined person, a stark contrast to his previous downtrodden appearance as a slave. His long hair had been cut short, revealing his handsome face tinged with a hint of shyness. The tailor gestured towards Atkin and asked, Miss Tanasia, what do you think? She replied, well, this is a worthwhile investment. Have the rest of the clothes sent to the room. The scene shifted to the dining table, where the maids had laid out a sumptuous feast. Tanasia gently and kindly asked Atkin, you must be hungry. Eat as much as you like. Seeing her uncharacteristic, gentle demeanor, he felt a little awkward but could only comply with her wishes. Atkin awkwardly held the knife, trying to cut the meat. Tanasia noticed his predicament and thought, is this knife that difficult to cut with? Then she gestured to a servant and told him, let's just have the pre-cut portions today. He stammered, oh, all right. She stared at Atkin, thinking, if he picks up the things he's never eaten before, I think he'll enjoy it. Not that. His emotions are completely numb. It would be nice if he could relax a little. A walk. After a while, they decided to take a walk in the forest near the house. Tanasia walked slowly, asking behind her, can we go a little further inside? Atkin followed, curious as to where she intended to take him. After walking a little further, Tanasia suddenly spoke, this is the place. She pointed to two logs in front of them and said to him, sit there. Be good, sit down. Seeing this, Atkin had no choice but to accept and sat down on the log opposite Tanasia. Looking up at the sky, Tanasia continued, this is the best place to watch the stars. You should try it too. Following her words, Atkin also looked up at the sky, gazing at the stars. Seeing the picturesque scene before him, you would also be amazed. Eyes fixed on the sky, Tanasia suddenly asked, how do you feel? Is it interesting to look at the stars like this? Atkin hesitated for a long time. Then his expression took a 180-degree turn, his face darkening. In a strange tone, he said, "How about we try a different method?" Hearing this, she couldn't help but be startled. A question mark popped in her head, and she froze. Seeing this, he continued, "Miss told me to seize Miss Nosha's power. If not that," he said, "then to eliminate Nosha. But no matter what she said, I still couldn't do it." At this point, Nasia couldn't help but feel a chill run down her spine, thinking, "What? Oh my God, he's saying I actually said such things." Then, the image of a whip flashed in her memory, and she realized something. "Oh, what have I done?" Before she could treat him well, she needed to say something. Nasia bit her lip. "I am sorry, Atkan." Hearing this, he seemed taken aback. Meanwhile, she continued to explain, "I know you must be tired. I apologize for everything I've said and done before. Actually, after the riding accident, I lost my memory. I don't remember what I did before, and even my hatred for Nosha has disappeared." Her voice choked with emotion. "From now on, I won't care about your abilities or anything else. So please forget those unreasonable demands I made of you. I promise I won't bother you anymore." Seeing this, Atkin clenched his fists and replied that she swore she'd rather be trampled and beaten by him as usual than this, because this was too agonizing. The scene changed. Nasia was now sitting in the library, lost in thought, as if immersed in the days following what had just transpired. She sighed dejectedly, thinking that Atkin's betrayal was much deeper than she had imagined. Perhaps she should abandon her principles and run far away. Only then could she ensure her survival. She kept telling herself, "It's not like that, right?" If that were the case, the head of the Lilo family wouldn't remain silent. "I'm only 15. It won't be easy to go alone." Nasia continued to grapple with her thoughts, wondering how she could change her fate. Suddenly, a voice pulled her from her thoughts. "Miss Nasia." It turned out that the voice belonged to Matt, the Lilo family's tutor. He kindly asked again, "Miss, why don't you try to solve the problem I just explained?" Seeing this, Nasia stammered, okay. But deep down, she felt worried and self-reproachful, thinking that she hadn't been able to concentrate on the tutor's explanation because she was distracted by other thoughts. She bit her pen, thinking, "Let me see." Then, Nasia suddenly realized, wait a minute, this problem seems simpler than she thought. She immediately replied, "The answer is 13. Hearing this, Professor Matt said, "Miss, are you solving this problem mentally now?" Nasia replied, "I'm doing it mentally, but I also came up with another equation." Then, she quickly sketched a draft and explained, "It will be easier to solve the problem this way." As she spoke, she marveled at her own skills, surprised that she actually knew all this. At this moment, the professor was also astonished, exclaiming, "My goodness! Although I know Miss is outstanding, this is beyond my imagination." He continued, "Up until now, Miss's willpower has been so strong that I couldn't stop her. Today, I must figure this out." A moment later, Professor Matt placed a stack of books on the table and said to her, "Now, Miss, please read these. Are there any textbooks in this pile that Miss can't solve?" Seeing this, Nasia was also surprised. "What's going on?" She glanced through the books and replied, "No, I can solve them all." At this, the professor pointed to the books and said to her, "These are advanced textbooks on magical techniques, things you've never learned before, Miss Nasia. Do you understand what you're saying, Miss Nasia? You have a talent for techniques." He continued, "So, Miss, don't waste any more time on magic and spiritual studies." Nasia was stunned upon hearing this. She realized she had become so natural that she could no longer form questions in her dreams. Through the ancient language within Atkin, she saw the content about the human weapon experiments she had found in the original work. She could understand all the techniques. But the Nasia in the original work didn't cultivate her true talent. Moreover, in order to imitate Nosha, she focused on learning things that weren't suitable for her. Lost in thought, Nasia suddenly realized something. She thought, "That's right, if I can make good use of my abilities." Suddenly, Professor Matt's voice beside her interrupted her thoughts. Miss Nasia, the Akan Empire, could become the greatest scholar on the continent. He continued sincerely, "Of course, this is on the premise that Miss doesn't hide this talent. If the master knew the truth, he might be happier than anyone." Seeing the professor's earnest attitude, Nasia was speechless, but she still agreed to his request. "Professor, You can also tell my father about my situation. I want to see him happy. After all, she thought, I have no reason to make the same choices as Nasia in the original story. Perhaps this is another way to change my fate. The scene shifted to the mansion's garden. Nasia and Akin were strolling together. However, her mind raced. The sudden realization that there might be another way, a newfound hope she couldn't quite understand, filled her. She glanced at Akin, thinking, that's right, there have been too many variables from the start. As I entrust my fate to Akin's heart, I must find a way to protect myself. Suddenly, a scream pierced the air. Hey, watch out. Then, seemingly out of nowhere, a torrent of water surged forward, hitting Nasia squarely, catching her completely off guard. The water drenched her, soaking her clothes completely. Nasia looked up, speculating, that voice just now. It turned out the scream had come from Nosha, her dear younger sister. After accidentally splashing her sister with water, she wore an expression of worried fear. Seeing this, Akin immediately offered his handkerchief to Nasia. Miss, are you all right? He asked. She quickly replied, thank you. You seem to be wet too. He responded, I'm fine. Nosha trembled. I am sorry. This might sound like I'm making excuses, but I really didn't mean to. Seeing this, Nasia offered comfort. It's okay. Her sister seemed surprised by her uncharacteristic behavior. Wiping her face, she continued to reassure her. I said it's okay. Nasia recalled a similar scene from the original story. The maids imploring Nosha to demonstrate her abilities, Nosha showcasing her still clumsy skills, a rather crass display. So, she told Nosha it was just an accident. Don't worry about it. Hearing this, Nosha's demeanor instantly shifted. Her face brightened, and she nodded repeatedly. Yes, but Nasia replied, however, practicing your skills here isn't ideal. Guests of the family might pass through, so we can't afford any mistakes. Nosha responded, oh, I understand. I didn't think of that. The two maids beside her cried out, Miss Nosha didn't do anything wrong. We were the ones who asked her to show her abilities. Nasia pointed at them. So, do you realize your mistake now? They trembled. Yes, we do. She continued, don't ask Nosha to do that again. Nosha is sensitive. She'll showcase her skills anywhere. They gasped. What? Her expression hardened. Do you not understand? Let me say it again. They stammered, no, it's not like that. We'll remember this for the rest of our lives. Witnessing this, Nosha hesitated for a long moment before speaking to her sister. Thank you, Nasia. Nasia asked abruptly. For what? She replied, for accepting my apology and for saying those things. Nasia spoke gently. It's nothing. You don't have to say that. As she spoke, she immediately thought of Akin and glanced at him. His clothes were soaked, revealing the scars that marred his skin. Seeing this, she said, well, I'll be going then, Nosha. As she turned to leave, her sister thought, her expression seemed to darken just now. Did I do something wrong again? A while later, back in the mansion, she called out Akin. He responded immediately. Yes, Mississippi. She turned to him. Wait here. Take those clothes off. At her words, he froze, standing motionless for 3 seconds. He hesitated, then slowly began to unbutton his shirt. Nasia opened a cabinet, searching for something. Her thoughts raced anxiously. Those wounds are my fault, aren't they? I should apply some medicine to prevent scarring. Then, she found a jar of scar cream. She turned back to him, but seeing him kneeling before her, she cried out in surprise, Akin, what are you doing? He answered calmly, because Miss told me to take my shirt off, so, she said, aghast. Really? Then why are you kneeling? She suddenly remembered, oh, right, in the dream, to test Akin's resilience. I whipped him. Nasia sighed, thinking, if Akin saw me telling him to take his shirt off, he might think it was a signal for that. Then, her gaze swept gently over his scar-ridden body. Opening the jar, she scooped out some ointment and slowly began applying it to each of the scars on his back. Akin flinched, asking, what are you doing, miss? She gestured to the jar. What does it look like? I'm applying medicine. Nasia continued to smooth the ointment over his skin. Stay still, sit properly. This won't cause any infection, so it won't hurt. Being kind to Akin might not change anything, but Nasia couldn't pretend to ignore the boy's wounds. So, treating Akin kindly was a small insurance policy for a future she couldn't foresee. This was entirely her own transformation. The scene shifted to a dimly lit room, illuminated only by a desk lamp. Nasia sat writing. As she wrote, she thought, I've been reconsidering the path to avoiding death. What if I could stop this war with my own power? If there's no war between the Kali Empire and Akin, many things will change. For example, the Lilo family won't be annihilated and will be able to protect themselves. The situation where Akin, the immortal of the enemy nation, kills me will never occur. And if I help Akin avoid being captured and returned to the laboratory, who knows, perhaps the Kali Empire will have already failed in their human weapon testing. Nasia pondered deeply as she wrote, the main issue being how to utilize her own abilities. At this moment, her eyes were vacant and her head bobbed slightly. Silently, she thought she still hadn't found the right approach. The next morning, a voice startled her awake. The young lady was still slumped over her desk, drool clinging to the corner of her mouth, her eyes weary. Victoria looked concerned. "Miss, why are you sleeping here? Is everything all right?" Nasia slowly sat up, looking at the maid. Her eyes lacked vibrancy, her complexion pale from lack of sleep, her voice slightly tired. "Oh, I just closed my eyes for a moment," she thought. "I was thinking all night and then fell asleep." Puzzled by the maid's presence, she asked, "What's the matter?" Victoria, the maid, answered with a serious expression. "The master wishes for everyone to have dinner together tonight. I'll help you get ready before dinner." Nasia asked again, confused, "Master?" She wondered if it was the head of the Lilo family, her father. Meanwhile, she raised a hand to wipe the drool from her mouth, thinking suspiciously, "What's going on?" As she walked, she thought, "This is the first time I've seen my father since I entered this body. I'm a little nervous." The Lilo patriarch is intelligent and composed, and he raised the family's reputation with his sharp business acumen. Contrary to his indifferent appearance, he is extremely considerate towards his daughters. Her face remained expressionless, but her thoughts continued. "It'll be fine, just act natural." Before her, a man with platinum blonde hair, dressed in a black and white suit, sat beside Nosha. Both looked in her direction. Unexpectedly, the platinum-haired man sitting across from her was Nasia's father, his handsome and radiant face and sharp blue eyes fixed on her. He gestured for her to enter. "Come in, Nasia." Her entire body stiffened, her face filled with shock, her mouth agape. Incredulously, she thought, "What? Why does my father look so young?" She suddenly remembered. Her father and her deceased mother. They had an arranged marriage and were married very young. Composing her features, she bowed to her father. "Father, you're back early. Don't you have work today?" As she spoke, she reminded herself to stay calm. Her father closed his eyes, answering her calmly. "Yes, that's right. But we had to cancel our plans because we wanted to give you a present." As he finished speaking, the bodyguard beside him bowed towards Nasia, holding a red box. Feigning surprise, Nasia asked, "What is it?" The bodyguard beside her father opened the red box, revealing an exquisitely crafted, glittering red necklace. Nasia gasped, her eyes fixed on the shimmering jewel. "This," her father began, his gaze warm as he looked at his daughter. "We heard from Matt that you've discovered a remarkable talent for magical techniques. This is a congratulatory gift, and I hope it meets your expectations." He continued, "From now on, think seriously about your future. I will do my best to fulfill your wishes." A blush warmed Nasia's cheeks as her eyes remained glued to the necklace. "This is unexpected," she murmured, gratitude lacing her voice. "Thank you, father." She wondered why her father had disrupted his schedule to give her this. He could have simply left it in her room. Her father's face flushed slightly. "Good, it's just what she wanted," he thought, pleased. But inwardly, he mused, "She's even more foolish than I thought." Nosha, beaming, clapped her hands in delight. "Congratulations. That gemstone jade bracelet is beautiful. It will suit you perfectly." Nasia offered a small smile. "Thank you." Nosha's eyes suddenly widened as something occurred to her. Now that I think about it, the Crown Prince's birthday ball is coming soon. It would be perfect if you wore that necklace. Nasia listened, a flicker of surprise registering on her face. The Crown Prince's birthday ball, she thought slowly. The Crown Prince's birthday ball was where Nosha and the male lead first met. The male lead was Crown Prince Rashio. At their first meeting, they both felt a spark of attraction. This was the beginning of their adult love story. Of course, Nasia, as the villainess, would try every possible means to tear them apart. But what if I supported the protagonist's love story? Surely, by not actively trying to tear these two apart, my chances of survival might increase, at least a little. Suddenly, Nasia placed the necklace box on the table. "Nosha," she began, holding the necklace, a pleasant expression on her face. Nasia addressed her sister. "Sister, would you do me the honor of borrowing this necklace?" Both her father and Nosha stared at her in surprise. Nosha hesitated before answering. A look of concern and confusion crossed Nosha's face as she raised a hand in refusal. "I think it suits you better." "It's not that I don't want to lend it," Nasia replied calmly. "I know, but I just think it would be even more beautiful if you wore it to the ball. Nosha responded shyly. Thank you, but how could I? Nasia's smile widened. Don't be shy. It clearly suits you better. Chuckling, she propped her chin on her hand and asked Nosha, Sister, would you help me pick out a dress to match this necklace for you? Inwardly, she reasoned that she didn't want to stand out too much at the ball. It was best for Nosha to truly shine and successfully navigate her first meeting with Rashio. Nosha's face lit up with anticipation, a delicate blush coloring her cheeks. Really? You want to choose a dress with me? Of course, Nasia replied cheerfully. Anything you want. Nosha squealed with delight. Wonderful. Their father suddenly spoke, a hint of approval in his voice. It seems the two of you are getting along quite well. He continued, Nasia, you don't have to go to such lengths. Nasia replied smoothly, It's no trouble at all. Her father turned to the guard beside him. Prepare another necklace like this one for me. The guard bowed. Yes, master. Nasia froze, a wave of shock coursing through her. Can he really do that? She wondered incredulously. Nosha, bubbling with excitement, asked eagerly, Sister, when can we go choose a dress? Nasia smiled at her younger sister. Whenever you're ready. Their father beamed. Let's discuss this over dinner. Both girls replied in unison. Okay. A lone figure stood at a distance, observing the laughter and warmth shared at the dining table. It was Akin. He watched them thoughtfully, a pensive expression on his face. His gaze settled on Nasia, who was animatedly engaged in conversation. Sensing someone's gaze upon her, Nasia paused mid-sentence. She turned her head to look in his direction. Akin was caught off guard, his observation discovered. She glanced at him, a soft smile gracing her lips, before turning back to the lively conversation at the table. Akin found himself speechless, surprised by the gentle acknowledgement. He meant to say something, anything, but the words caught in his throat. Suddenly, his hands clenched into fists, tendons standing out on his hands. He muttered under his breath, What am I even thinking? His grip tightened on the bedsheets, the veins in his hands bulging. He was asleep, but his face was contorted in discomfort, sweat beading on his forehead. His body trembled, his breath coming in ragged gasps as he clutched the blankets. In his dream, he was running, fleeing from a figure cloaked in black. He pushed forward, his face a mask of worry and exertion, sweat plastering his hair to his scalp. As he ran, his foot caught on a loose stone. He stumbled, crashing to the ground in a painful, jarring fall. Suddenly, shadowy figures materialized around him, both in front and behind. He looked up, his eyes wide with terror. A voice echoed, Akin, did you really think you could escape? He struggled to sit up, to face his tormentors. Just then, one of the figures uncorked a vial. The stranger's voice dripped with malice. Dead or alive, you won't make it to the Caliver Kingdom. Atkins stared, frozen in fear, as the figure loomed over him. He jolted awake, heart pounding, drenched in sweat, his face pale and drawn. I haven't had a peaceful night's sleep since I escaped the laboratory, he thought, his breath still ragged. Every night, the same nightmare, them chasing me. He rose from the bed, his expression grim, and opened the wardrobe. Inside, a worn brown bag sat in the center of the shelf. He reached for the bag, his fingers closing around the rough fabric. As soon as that girl's strange behavior disappears, I have to return to my original position. Clutching the bag, his gaze drifted, lost in thought. So, absolutely no holding on to any hope. Ever since his identity had been revealed, Akin had seen an opportunity to leave the Lilo family estate. The pursuers sent by the Kalu Empire found it difficult to infiltrate the Lilo family, a high-ranking Akin nobility. He remained here only because he considered it a safe haven. If you secured a safe destination and saved enough for travel expenses, Akin can leave this place at the right time. Looking at his reflection in the mirror, Akin clenched his fists, steeling his resolve to endure until that moment arrived. He left his room and walked down the corridor when suddenly a sneering voice called out from behind, Well, look who it is. Akin turned to see two other workers, their faces twisted in mockery. So, you become an errand boy and climbed up in the world, huh? Looks like you don't even bother to greet us anymore. You, not wanting to cause trouble, Akin bowed his head in acknowledgement. They were the ones who used to share his room. Watching Akin turn to walk away, the man behind him felt a surge of humiliation. His face flushed with anger, his hand tightening around a wrench. That impertinent brat, he yelled, and hurled the wrench at Akin. It struck the back of Akin's head with a sickening thud, sending him sprawling to the floor. The wrench, stained with blood, clattered to the ground. A menacing voice hissed from behind, You're in trouble if I tell your master about this. Calmly, Atkin touched the back of his neck. Try spouting nonsense, and I'll split your head in two. He paused, noticing the blood now coating his fingers. Then he spoke, his voice level. Next time, remember to say hello before you do something like that. Thanks to you, my clothes aren't dirty. At his words, the man's fury intensified. You little punk, you think wearing those clothes makes you a noble? You think that pretty face of yours is going to keep you in your current position? No, you'll be discarded soon enough. The other man quickly interjected. All right, he's already a freak. At their words, Atkin's expression darkened. He recalled the bespectacled man's words. You're a walking time bomb. If your emotions run too high, you can incinerate everything around you in an instant. If Atkin used his power, he could easily take at least one life. The problem was, he couldn't control it. Once unleashed, he had to destroy everything in front of him before he could stop. Atkin rarely got angry about such things, but just a little. Just then, a female voice interrupted his thoughts. When will I be able to shed my identity? Atkin. The three men looked bewildered, unsure of what was happening, as Tanasia approached gracefully. My schedule suddenly changed, she stated clearly, so I came to find you. Then, glancing at the two bullies, a chilling smile played on her lips. But who would have thought I'd witness such an interesting scene? The two men immediately bowed nervously. Oh, our apologies, miss, they stammered, not daring to meet her gaze. You need to apologize to Atkin first, Tanasia replied. It seems he's been injured by something thrown at him. The man who had thrown the wrench now trembled as he apologized, claiming they hadn't meant to hurt him. They were just so angry. Atkin muttered a few words about them being all right, but Tanasia made it clear she'd warned them. Her personality wasn't very good. If you touch my things again, she threatened, just you wait and see. Understood, the other man replied fearfully. Yes, master. She waved her hand dismissively. Get out of my sight before I change my mind. Atkin watched his mistress silently. How's your wound? Tanasia asked, her voice laced with concern. Are you all right? Yes, it's nothing serious, Atkin replied. The girl's eyes widened. What? She exclaimed. Didn't you hear what I just said? You're my servant. You're mine. So, you're not allowed to get hurt without my permission. That's an order. Atkin felt a flicker of unease at her words. He looked up and replied, Yes, I understand. Tanasia turned abruptly, her voice cold. Don't waste any time. Go and get your wound treated. Nosha is waiting. As she walked away, Atkin quickly asked, Master, where are you going? She turned back. I'm going to pick out a dress to wear to the royal ball. He addressed her as Nosha. Then, Master, please leave me here. I'll take care of my injuries myself. Nosha asked, surprised. What are you talking about? You're going to the royal ball too, so you need to coordinate your attire accordingly. Atkin was bewildered. You mean I'm going too? And so, Nosha took Atkin to try on clothes. The maids dressed him in a variety of outfits, leaving him utterly exhausted. They treated him like a doll, creating imaginative mix-and-match ensembles. Try these jewels, they suggested. Tanasia and Nosha observed from the sofa. Nosha, feeling a pang of envy, remarked, Your servant looks good in anything. Tanasia, pleased, considered the investment worthwhile. Then, Nosha confessed, I think you have great taste. I really liked the dress you picked out for me before. The protagonist smiled. I'm glad you liked it. Then, pointing at Atkin, Tanasia instructed, Go change into that outfit and tell the maids to pack up the tailcoat for me. Opening her collection book to browse, Tanasia thought, Now, I just need to pick out a dress for myself, right? I enjoy shopping, but this is really tiring. She flipped through the clothes, her face devoid of excitement. Just then, a servant addressed her. Miss Lilo, I prepared the outfits according to your usual style. Various brightly colored evening gowns were displayed before her. I think this style suits Nosha better than me, Tanasia thought. Then it struck her that made sense, since Nosha was essentially a copy of Tanasia. The protagonist waved her hand at the servant. My preferences have changed, so I don't wear those kind of clothes anymore. She glanced to the side, where a jet black outfit with dark crimson patterns exuded an aura of mystery and allure. Compared to these, Tanasia stated, Bring me the clothes over there. The servant spoke respectfully. It's quite different from your usual style, miss, but it seems like it would suit you well if you tried it on once. Tanasia didn't argue. Well then, just bring me that one. Nosha spoke with concern. Sister, I've spent all this time picking out a dress for you and a suit for the servant, but you're not even trying on your own clothes. Tanasia replied calmly, I don't need to try it on to know it'll suit me, and I'm a little tired now. Hearing this, Nosha became dejected. Meanwhile, Nasia beckoned a servant over with a wave of her hand. "I'll prepare the tea," the delighted servant chirped, already anticipating the order. "Ice black tea, please," Nosha requested excitedly. "Nasia will have the same." Moments later, 2 glasses of tea were brought out, but the servant carrying the tray seemed to be trembling. Her face pale, she stammered, "Here is the iced black tea for the 2 ladies." "Thank you," Nasia replied, observing the servant closely. Why is she so nervous? She wondered. As the servant set the glasses down, her sleeve accidentally brushed against one, causing the entire contents to spill onto the floor, splashing Nasia's dress. The other servants gasped and scrambled for towels. Nosha, sitting beside her, was startled. "Are you all right?" she asked, seeing that the hem of Nasia's dress was completely soaked. Just then, Atkin quietly knelt down, his unexpected action catching Nasia's attention. Her eyes flickered with surprise. Atkin gently dabbed at the spill on Nasia's skirt. "Master, are you hurt anywhere?" he asked softly. Nasia, snapping back to reality, felt a blush creep up her cheeks. She mumbled a vague response, a little flustered. The 2 sisters watched in silence as Atkin continued to tend to the spill. After a moment, he said, "It's still a little damp, but it won't be wet anymore." Nasia was surprised. "What? You're quite skilled at this," she commented. "I know it's natural for a servant to do this for their master," she thought, "but my feelings are still a little strange. Is it because I just saw that careful, servant-like expression on Atkin's face? What is this feeling?" Nasia reached out, almost unconsciously, and stroked Atkin's hair. How charming, she thought. A sweet, almost charged atmosphere filled the air. Atkin froze, startled by his master's touch. Nasia, as if suddenly realizing what she was doing, quickly withdrew her hand. "Oh, I don't know what came over me." "Never mind." Then, a little awkwardly, she added, "Thank you. You can get up now." Atkin's loyal actions seem so endearing, she mused. Do I really have this kind of preference? Across from her, Nosha watched the scene with wide, sparkling eyes. Her face flushed crimson. But that's not important right now, Nasia thought. The servants were bowing deeply, apologizing profusely. "I truly don't know how to apologize," one said. "It's my fault for not training the staff properly." Nasia, settling back in her chair with a cool demeanor, replied, "You don't think a simple apology is enough, do you?" The manager bowed low. "Of course, we will compensate you. If there's anything you desire, miss, please tell us." "First," Nasia began, "I'll be charging for the cleaning of the servants' clothes and my dress. If it can't be cleaned properly, you'll need to provide me with a new one." "Yes, of course," the manager readily agreed. Nasia continued, "Do you want to be punished like last time?" Nasia was taken aback when the staff member responded in such a way. "Punished?" she echoed. The manager's face fell. "When something like this happened before, Miss, you struck me directly. Would you be so generous as to spare me this time?" Nasia was stunned. She recalled the moment the servant had trembled while setting down the glasses. So that's why their hands were shaking. Because they were terrified of me. Her nervousness was only natural. My personality isn't good, but the original Nasia would have jumped at the chance. Who would have thought she actually hit the staff member? With her own hands. What is Atkin thinking right now? Nosha is quietly waiting for my decision. They both act as if they're used to this kind of situation. In my heart, I want to deny that I ever did such a thing, but the staff member continued, "Of course, it was our fault, so it's only natural for Miss to punish us." At that moment, Nasia interrupted, waving her hand dismissively. "Enough," she said. "You don't need to explain any further because I won't do that. The staff member I punished before, is she still working here?" Hearing this, the manager replied with a hint of surprise, "No, I've taken care of it. She won't appear in the dressing room again, so you don't need to worry, Mississippi." Nasia responded, "There's no need for that. If you're willing, you can rehire her. As for the compensation for the dress, I've already given it to the staff member I punished as consolation." The dressing room staff, hearing Nasia's words, were in disbelief. Even Nosha, sitting beside her, looked at her with admiration. This was something the protagonist had to bear after Nasia occupied her body. But such mistakes were easily rectified. At that moment, Atkin, too, looked at his master with different eyes. After the 2 young ladies left, the dressing room staff came out to see them off, bowing and saying, "Thank you, Miss Lilo. Please visit us again." After their figures disappeared from sight, the staff member who had spilled the water collapsed on the floor, letting out a relieved sigh. The person next to her asked with concern if she was all right. The bewildered staff member asked, "But how? Why did the miss forgive me?" Her colleague immediately replied, "How could we possibly know the mood swings of the nobles? Perhaps Miss Tozio is in a good mood today." At that moment, the manager spoke up, unsure why Lilo had suddenly changed, but perhaps the rumors about her could be completely reversed. Atkin, standing by the cashier's desk, heard everything they were talking about and fell in a deep thought. The carriage stopped in front of the palace, and the servant respectfully invited Nosha to disembark. The girl turned and asked her sister, "Aren't you coming down?" Nasia, still seated inside the carriage, replied, "I want to gather my thoughts. I'll take another turn around here and then go back." Nosha replied cheerfully, "Okay, I understand. Thank you so much for today." The protagonist waved goodbye to her sister, continuing her stroll. Now alone, she was immersed in her own thoughts. The compensation should be just enough, right? If I paid more, there might be rumors about how much I've changed. But Malesia's misdeeds happened in places I didn't even know about. It turns out that what I knew wasn't everything. What did I do wrong, and where? Indeed, if I can't find a way to protect myself, then, lost in thought, Nasia looked around. Just then, her gaze landed on someone sitting opposite her, Atkin. He looked surprised. She spoke first, asking, "I thought you would have left with Nosha. I wanted to be alone for a while to think things over." Atkin's impassive face stared back at his mistress. Nasia was a little taken aback. "What's wrong? Is there something you want to tell me?" Atkin finally spoke. "Perhaps I mentioned it once before, but I don't know what Master intends to do, but it's truly uncomfortable. Please tell me honestly what Master wants to do." Hearing his words, Nasia panicked, not understanding what she had done wrong. Suddenly, she remembered what had happened earlier in the dressing room. "Is it because I touched your head so affectionately that you're thinking this way?" Atkin heard his mistress's question, but remained silent, offering no response. The two stared at each other, and Nasia thought, even in my dreams, no matter how much he was beaten, he never complained. But with just a single compliment, he reacts like this. Come to think of it, when you saw the stars in the night sky, your reaction was exactly the same as now. I thought you were dissatisfied with how much my attitude changed in just one morning, but it turns out that's not the case. Then she said to him, "Atkin, you don't think that was your first time, do you? Whether it was when you heard my sweet compliments or when we looked at the stars together that night." Atkin replied dumbfoundedly, "Is that really so important?" At this, the protagonist smiled triumphantly. He didn't deny it. Maybe this guy really is a good person. Atkin is so mature that I forget he's the legendary villain, but he's still just a boy. Thinking this, she tossed her hair and said aloud, "Of course it's important. If that's true, I just want to treat you better." Hearing these words for the first time, Atkin's eyes widened in surprise. Inside the palace, as soon as Nosha entered, she was surrounded by servants who asked, "Miss, is everything all right?" Nosha turned around, puzzled, and asked what happened. The servants didn't answer directly, instead saying snidely, "It's obvious at a glance. Miss Nasia pretended to help you choose a dress, but ended up harming you, didn't she? She clearly picked the ugliest dress in the wardrobe." Nosha was surprised to hear this. "Don't say that. Thanks to her, I chose a dress I liked because they were all so beautiful. You don't know how hard it was to choose just one." Hearing this, the maids replied, "Our miss is truly too kind. What should we do now, miss? Don't be like that. Be wary of Miss Nasia's tricks. I heard she's planning to ruin the dress you're going to wear to the ball." Hearing the servant's words, Nosha was startled. "What?" Then she pondered, thinking perhaps the servants were right. "I've been tricked by her, not once or twice, and landed in difficult situations. But what she said to the servants was different from before. Even when I was soaked from head to toe, even when father gave me the necklace, even helping me choose a dress today, her treating me so well, it's the first time since I discovered this ability. Who knows? Maybe I could become close with her again. So, thank you for your concern, but you don't have to say such things anymore. I believe she has changed." The servants looked bewildered, replying, "Yes, if Miss says so, then we apologize for any offense." Then the whole group turned and walked away. Nosha wondered if she had done well. "Well done. I wish I could get a head pat as a reward too." Suddenly, whispers arose. Could that girl be the eldest daughter of the Lilo family? Her looks and talent are no match for a younger sister. It's hard to believe they're twins. Good genes are only inherited by one person, and the other only gets the leftover scraps. Suddenly, Nasia bumped into a servant who was startled and panicked. I am sorry. But the other party didn't forgive her, instead turning around with a gaze as sharp as a knife. Is she mocking me too? This bewildered the servant, making her tremble with fear. Tanasia suddenly grabbed her hand and pulled her away, saying, just apologizing isn't enough. Come with me. You'd better not scream. Suddenly, Tanasia woke up with a jolt. The same dream again. This time, it wasn't just a simple dream. Just then, a servant came in to check on her, saying, Miss, you're awake. She nodded in response. Jalen anxiously asked, why is Miss so pale? Did you have a nightmare? Tanasia replied hesitantly, a little unsure. The maid quickly comforted her. Miss, please forget those bad dreams. Today is the day we attend the royal ball. There will be a lot of fun tonight. She thought to herself, so that's it. Today is the day the beloved goddess, the protagonist Nosha, meets the male lead, Prince Rojo, for the first time. Is something wrong? As long as I stay quiet as planned and go to the royal ball with Akin. Massage, makeup, even the clothes, hours spent preparing for the ball, even though we're already at home. I just want to go home. Coming downstairs, she was incredibly surprised to see Akin. When did you start waiting here? He replied, I just arrived. Really? You look very dashing today. Akin modestly said, you flatter me. I'm just wearing the clothes you picked out for me. Tanasia immediately responded, what makes this outfit even more perfect is that face. Already handsome, now even more radiant. As an older brother, I'm a little hesitant. She continued teasing, what's wrong? Don't you know you're handsome? Akin continued. Miss has been a bit much lately. Tanasia asked in surprise. A bit much? What do you mean? Is Miss too straightforward? She playfully and sweetly retorted. Isn't that a compliment? Just then, Nosha's voice rang out. Sister, you're here already? Nosha asked, her voice bright. Yes, sister, Tanasia replied. Are you walking with me today? A warm smile graced Tasia's face. Of course. Why do you ask? Just curious. Nosha admitted, a hint of shyness in her tone. We usually walk separately. I'm really happy to be walking with you. There's no reason for us to walk separately, Tanasia affirmed. We're sisters, after all. Within the Lilo royal palace, as the trio entered, the whispers began, a low hum of gossip filling the air. Aren't those the famous twin daughters of the Lilo family? One voice murmured. I know them too, another replied. The younger sister is known for her radiant presence, while the older one is just a shadow. Isn't that right? Tanasia overheard the whispers, the words echoing the dream she'd had earlier that morning. Just like my dream this morning, she thought. Now I understand why Tanasia always took her own carriage. Every time I walk by, those whispers and murmurs seem to be directed at me, and it irritates me. Akin glanced at her with concern, his gaze catching hers for a fleeting moment. Tanasia quickly pushed the thoughts aside, focusing on the task at hand. First, she needed to step away so Nosha and Rojo could meet naturally. She turned to her sister. Nosha, she said, I'll see you later. I think I'll walk around with the servants for a bit. All right, see you later, Nosha replied, her attention already drifting elsewhere. Tanasia and Akin moved away from the gathering crowd. She needed some water, she thought, something to clear her head. This was Akin's first time here, and it would be best to have some refreshments ready. Wait here for a moment, she instructed him. Yes, miss, Akin replied. With that, Tanasia turned and walked away, leaving Akin seemingly captivated by her retreating figure. But then, the whispers started again, their ugliness tainting the air. That black hair looks like it's stained with filth. Akin glanced at the speakers, his expression unreadable. And what's with that gloomy face? Another voice chimed in. Besides, the younger sister already possesses outstanding abilities, but the older sister still has nothing. That necklace looks exactly like Nosha's, doesn't it? Someone observed. The older sister must be imitating her. Nothing special about her, so she has to resort to copying. The words struck a chord within Akin, reminding him of the times he too had been trampled upon and looked down on. After all, he was just a useless orphan. Even if he died during the experiments, no one would know. Suddenly, a loud slap echoed through the hall, startling him. Tanasia had just slapped another young noblewoman. Akin, having just arrived, overheard the tail end of the conversation. From now on, Tanasia warned, her voice sharp and dangerous. Listen to me carefully. If you ever speak ill of me behind my back again, no matter who you are, I will rip your mouth apart. Akin was taken aback by the forcefulness of Tasia's words. With that, she turned to leave, bumping into him in the process. Let's go, he said softly, guiding her away from the scene. Nasia felt a wave of shame wash over her. She needed to control her temper better, she chided herself. Only then could she truly become the Nasia she was meant to be. Miss, Atkins suddenly spoke, his voice hesitant. Would you really rip their mouths apart? No, not at all, she replied quickly, flustered by his question. It was a lie, he pressed. Even if it was a lie, she retorted, a touch of defensiveness in her tone. It was a warning. Some people just don't understand when you speak to them nicely. Do you really think I would do something like that? She asked, directing her frustration at Atkin. If it were you, miss, he replied calmly, it would be possible. You leave me speechless, she muttered. So about the royal ball, even though I ruined the atmosphere and left. It was nothing special, Atkin interrupted, his tone matter of fact. It just ended. Really? Nasia asked, a hint of disappointment in her voice. I thought there might be something interesting. Atkin seemed unfazed. Unbeknownst to her, the Nasia who acted so cruelly within the Lilo household was, in fact, the subject of ridicule among the other nobles. In the aristocratic world, where the strong were flattered with sweet words and the weak were ruthlessly trampled upon, Nasia was the weak one. When she stood before others, it felt like a reminder to those who had bothered her in the past. Somehow, he found a strange sense of comfort in that. I hate places like this, he thought, but in this situation, I don't hate it at all. He paused, his thoughts turning inward. But what would be the best course of action? Atkin turned his gaze back to Nasia, his expression thoughtful. Suddenly, a sound reached his ears, the murmur of voices. Then, Nasia's voice cut through the noise. Atkin. Yes, miss, he responded instantly. Suddenly, Nasia yanked him away, and they both tumbled behind a row of nearby trees. Her face serious, Nasia whispered, quiet for a moment. The incessant chatter buzzed around them. I can't believe I walked this far into the Lilo estate, she muttered. This is such a bother. Peeking from behind the trees, Nasia thought, I just saw a young man with red hair in fancy clothes, which means... She strained to listen to the older man with white hair, who was speaking. He was saying something about how if they got close to Miss Lilo, it could be helpful in the future. Your Highness. Nasia suddenly realized that the figure she had glimpsed was indeed the male lead of the play Beloved Goddess, Prince Rojo, and the person accompanying him was Regan, his loyal servant. Returning to the conversation, Prince Rojo retorted, It's not that I want to play these family games. It's just that when I become emperor, I want to make the Aqua Empire stronger. Regan responded awkwardly, I understand what that means. To achieve that goal, it's important to build a relationship with the Lilo family. The prince sighed. This ball is for my birthday, but I have to pretend to get along with the Lilo family's daughter, even though I feel nothing inside. At that moment, Nasia realized with a jolt that this was a conversation she wasn't supposed to hear. If Prince Rojo discovered she'd been eavesdropping, things would become incredibly awkward between them. She quickly turned to Atkin. You saw that too, right? Let's quietly leave this place now. Understood, he replied. Suddenly, Nosha appeared. Sister, what are you doing here? Nasia asked, bewildered. Nosha, are you all right? Before he could finish his sentence, Prince Rojo and his servant Regan had spotted them. Who's over there? The prince asked sharply. I didn't expect anyone to be in such a secluded spot, Nasia responded awkwardly. Nosha quickly interjected. It's an honor to meet you, Your Highness. I am Nosha, daughter of the Lilo family, and this is my older sister, Nasia. I couldn't find her in the hall, so I came looking for her. This took Prince Rojo by surprise. Miss Lilo, I'm not sure if our conversation caused any misunderstanding. If you overheard anything, please allow me to explain. Nosha quickly replied, It's all right. I don't want to trouble your highness. I'm past the age of playing family games. This young lady did here, Nasia stated. If you're asking whether I heard you say you don't want to play family games, then yes, I heard it clearly. At these words, Nasia suddenly fell silent, then called out, Nosha. With that, Nosha quickly grabbed Nasia's hand and pulled her away. If there's nothing else, we'll excuse ourselves. Happy birthday, Your Highness. Prince Rojo, unsure of what to say, simply watched them leave. Nasia, surprised, turned back to look. She thought, it's over, it's completely over. I was planning to get those two together, but if this is how it is, it's completely ruined. By now, the three of them had entered the palace corridor. Nosha finally began to scold her. I can't believe even the crown prince is so careless with his words. Sister, are you hurt? The question took Nasia by surprise. Nosha continued. Actually, just now in the hall, a few people came up to me and started talking about you so casually. I warned them, but I don't know if others have been bad-mouthing you too. You got so angry that you smashed a glass and stormed out. Nasia, listening intently, asked, You followed me because you were worried about me? She thought, so that's why she acted that way towards Prince Rojo. I'm really grateful that she's worried about me, but right now I feel like my life is in danger, not just hurt. I really can't let those two miss out on each other like this. Nasia then said, Nosha, I think you misunderstood something. Misunderstood? You don't know where you heard that from, but the crown prince is looking at the distant future. If Aqua is to become a strong empire, harmony between the nobles and the royal family is crucial. Even if that harmony is absolutely necessary, it can't please everyone. Nosha stated, It's a shame. Even so, the fact is that he and I aren't a good match. Then she explained, I mean, we shouldn't look at everything from one side. The crown prince is also just a man with great ambition. Ambition? Yes. You know, right? He's a prodigy who started learning swordsmanship at the age of 5, and despite experiencing many battles, he has never lost once. Not only that, but his captivating eyes and rose-red lips make countless women in the capital fall hopelessly in love at first glance. I've heard that rumor too. Nasia continued cheerfully. So you know how promising the crown prince is, right? In terms of intellect, physical strength, and beauty, he's impeccable. As such a perfect man, it's only natural that he possesses such grand ambitions. Meanwhile, Akin was also listening intently to her words. Nosha said, Touched sister, do you like a crown prince? Nasia exclaimed in shock. Absolutely not. I just don't want either side to have misunderstandings and avoid each other. Let's not do that. Let's see what the crown prince has to say. If you want to go, well, good job. Let's go now. Nasia urged with a smile. Suddenly, a voice called out unexpectedly. Miss Lilo, you were here. Nosha panicked. Lady True, why are you here? Oh dear, did you forget? You promised to show me your abilities, and there are many people waiting to see it now. Nasia thought worriedly. No way. After hearing Lady TRU's words, I realized that the novel's events were about to unfold in reality. Rojo and Nosha are drawn to each other for justifiable reasons. But the crux of the matter is that there's a minor villain in the novel, named Lana Leeds. Lana Leeds is trying to humiliate Nosha, and she's going to try to set off fireworks when the water starts moving. As planned, before demonstrating her ability, Nosha will be startled and surprised by the sound of the fireworks, spraying water everywhere. Something will prevent the water from falling on Nosha, and that will be Prince Rojo. Nasia suddenly burst out laughing. She'll see that romantic scene from afar, but if it happens now, everything might deviate from the original plan. Returning to the previous conversation, Nasia suddenly interrupted Nosha. Before we enter the hall, try to meet His Highness and talk to him. Her sister asked hesitantly, Should I go? But I heard everyone is waiting for me. At that moment, Lady True said, You're talking about the crown prince, right? He will be attending the hall after all, so why don't you go there to see him? Nosha replied, Come to think of it, Lady True is indeed right. Then she turned to Nasia and said, Sister, I'll go to the hall to see His Highness and talk to him. Nasia hesitated, but, Okay, Nosha, I'll come later. You go first. All right, see you there. After her sister left, Nasia turned and called out, Akin, now go to the hall and find Miss Leeds. Tell her I want to see her for a moment. Both Lana and I hate Nasia, so somehow she and I became good friends. At this moment, Lana is probably in the room preparing the fireworks display. She'll time it right and signal the servants to hold the fireworks first. The important thing now is to divert her attention and buy some time. Nasia promptly told Atkin that she often visited the Lilo household. You know what kind of person she is, right? Yes, he replied. Then she continued, If possible, keep her there. Don't let her go anywhere. I understand. With that, he left immediately, following Nasia's instructions to the letter. Suddenly, she called out to Atkin, asking for his help with an extremely urgent tone, which surprised him a little. Atkin immediately reassured her, Yes, I'll do my best. Thanks to these words, Nasia felt a little relieved and continued to think about what she should do now. She had to find Prince Rojo. She would try to persuade him to talk to Nosha, hoping everything would go according to plan. However, life definitely wouldn't go as planned. She blamed herself, feeling utterly disappointed. Everything is ruined. A moment ago, Natia was looking around for the prince. Where would Rojo be? Apparently, in the original story, when Nosha displayed this ability, he was nearby. Why would he be there? The course of events has really deviated from the original story. Natia immediately walked towards Rojo and greeted him respectfully. "Your Highness." He asked, "Are you the young lady I saw at the manor?" She cautiously introduced herself. "I am Natia, the eldest daughter of the Lilo family." "I see. You seem to be in a hurry. Is something the matter?" Natia calmly replied. "There seemed to be some misunderstanding earlier, so I wanted to talk to you again." Though slightly flustered, the prince politely replied, "That's good. I thought I wouldn't have a chance to speak again." She immediately got to the point. "Your Highness, my sister was also there earlier. It would be great if the three of us could talk together." The prince said, "That would be good as well." Meanwhile, Nosha was in the hall demonstrating her ability, and Prince Rojo was present. Natia rejoiced inwardly. "Good, I'm not late." But one thing worried her. It seemed Akin had stopped Lana as she requested. If things continued this way, there wouldn't be anything to embarrass Nosha. It seems Rojo is also interested in Nosha's ability. The previous situation can still be salvaged. Suddenly, she realized something. Holding a firework in his hand, Natia suddenly realized that the person was Lana's servant. "Why is he taking out the fireworks?" She immediately asked for permission. "Your Highness, my sister is demonstrating her skills to everyone." The prince replied, "It's all right to wait a little longer, as I'm also interested in watching these skills. Do you want to get a closer look?" "Certainly." At the same time, Natia couldn't help but feel uneasy, sensing something was amiss. What if something really happens? So she decided to have Rojo get closer to Nosha. But she also had a question. Are they planning to set off the fireworks now? Lana isn't here either, so why? Also, Nosha and Rojo are still too far apart. So Natia said, "Your Highness, please stand in front of me." The prince replied, "Thank you. If you want to create a situation where Rojo blocks the water for Nosha, you need to get a little closer. Just a little bit closer, a little bit closer." Finally, the fireworks went off, and Nosha screamed in alarm. Natia thought worriedly, "No, if this is the case, everything will be in vain." Suddenly, someone pushed Prince Rojo, startling him. Now, as expected, Prince Rojo stepped in and blocked the water for Nosha. But then something unexpected happened. She said awkwardly, "Your Highness, this..." At that moment, Natia thought, "I'm doomed." "I acted before I could even react." Prince Rojo said, "Perhaps this wasn't an accident, was it?" Natia panicked and hurriedly said, "I'm sorry. The fireworks suddenly went off, so I didn't know either. Since it's my fault, even if I had 10 mouths, I wouldn't dare make any excuses. First, please use this." Prince Rojo was furious at this moment. He said angrily, "So now you want me to believe what you're saying?" Nosha stood by, clearly worried. "Your Highness, do you mean that this is because I did this on purpose, so you can say it wasn't like that, right? One push, one splash of water. Twin sisters should be synchronized, right?" A lord scolded them. Nosha quickly defended herself, saying there was no evidence and questioning why he was unfairly accusing others. She said she had already been directly affected and didn't know what more evidence was needed. Natia, bewildered, interrupted. "Wait a moment. There seems to be some misunderstanding between the two of you." At the same time, both Prince Rojo and Nosha snapped. "It seems there's no place for you to interject here. Stay out of this." Startled and afraid, Natia thought, "I originally intended to help make their first meeting a success, but it has completely failed. So that's how it is. But where is Akin now?" Clearly, neither Akin nor Lana were in the hall. Then, why did that servant set off the fireworks? Natia looked around, but couldn't find anyone. She asked a servant if he had seen her attendant, and he replied that he hadn't. She continued to ask, "Then what about Miss Lana?" He said he hadn't seen Miss Lana either. Pondering for a moment, she continued to ask, "Has there been any major commotion near the hall?" The servant immediately replied, "If you're talking about a commotion, Akin is standing guard outside the door." Natia suddenly said, "Akin, Miss is here." She abruptly asked, "What are you doing here?" Suddenly, Lana's voice rang out, cursing, "You won't open the door? If I get out of here, I won't let you off." Natia whispered, "Could it be that Miss Lana is inside?" "Yes, did you lock her up?" Atkins suddenly mimicked her whisper. "Miss said that no matter what, we had to hold the fort, so I did as she said." "But how did you lure her in?" "I said Miss Natia was waiting inside." "How clever. And then you just stood at the door like this." "Yes, she's been asking. Even now, she keeps asking." Miss said if possible, to stall Miss Lana for as long as possible, so I don't know how much longer I can hold out. Lana's voice rang out again. I told you to open the door. Ignoring her desperate screams, Atkins said softly, Miss, as you can see, I'm afraid I can't bear the consequences of this, so I've been waiting for your arrival. Did I do something wrong? Nasia laughed upon hearing this and said, No, you did very well, as you perfectly carried out my request. I was just surprised. Atkin hesitantly replied, as it was the first time Miss had requested his help, which surprised her greatly. Lana suddenly shouted, Now let's try throwing things and see what happens. We can't delay any longer. Nasia quickly knocked on the door. Lana, it's me. She stopped her panting and asked again, Nasia, is that you? Wait a moment, I'll be right there. Before her was a mess. She had ruined everything. Seeing Atkin, Lana immediately flew into a rage, yelling, You lowly servant! How dare you lock me in here? Nasia interrupted, Wait a minute, Lana. There's nothing to say to my servant. This was my request. Lana couldn't believe it and asked again, What did you say? Why would you do this? I just wanted to give you a surprise, but it seems I was a little late, wasn't I? Lana suddenly lost her composure, screaming in disbelief. Nasia, do you know what I prepared today? Do you think I can believe those words? Inside the room, Lana huddled, speechless. Nasia took Atkin's arm, a friendly and meaningful smile playing on her lips, and said, I'm sorry, Lana, but the fireworks have already gone off, so don't worry. On the other hand, I have a question. Why weren't the fireworks stopped when she didn't receive the signal? This question made the villain Lana think for a moment before answering. I had given the order that even without the signal, the fireworks had to be set off on time, just in case. Upon hearing this, Nasia gave a scornful laugh. So that's how it is. She still appeared cheerful and said kindly, It must be stuffy in here. Let's go to the hall together. Lana said, No, you two go ahead. I'll tidy up my clothes and come later. Nasia turned to her and said, All right, see you later then. Lana tried to outwardly maintain her composure, but in reality, she was burning with rage, gnashing her teeth, clenching her fists, and forcing herself to suppress her fury. At this moment, she realized her powers had just emerged. Lana recalled, Because I couldn't maximize my abilities like Nosha, my skills weren't noticed by anyone. Even the Chita family doesn't care about the abilities of an illegitimate child like me, and that's become the reason for comparisons between me and Nosha. If it weren't for Nosha, I would have already gained recognition from the family. Lana's hatred for Nosha was so intense that she imagined using magic to control a candle and crush it in her hand. Then her thoughts drifted to Nasia. Compared to me, she hates Nosha even more. After all, blood is thicker than water. Lana could no longer control her rage and slashed the candle into pieces. She stared at the fragments of the candlestick scattered across the floor, her eyes filled with hatred, silently vowing, Nasia, you will pay for deceiving me. The scene changes. Nasia sat by the window, lost in thought. Long after the incident, she finally realized something clearly. The relationships between people are incredibly complex and delicate, and even small differences can lead to entirely different outcomes. Based on the deviations from the original script, at the royal ball, Nosha followed me out, and Crown Prince Rohir was further away from where the incident occurred. In the original script, Lana also needed to be cautious. She made no attempt to hide her distrust of me. What's going on? Even if I anticipated it, trusting others truly introduces too many variables. To prevent the war with the Karui Empire, something more certain is needed. Nasia was deep in thought, her hair disheveled. Suddenly, her maid, Jelen, pushed open the door, cheerfully announcing, Miss, the professor has arrived. Nasia sighed and asked, He's already here? She thought to herself, I'm so tired today and wanted to rest. Then she told the servant, Please invite the professor in. Next, a cart piled high with stacks of books was pulled in by Professor Matt, who, smiling brightly as a flower, greeted her enthusiastically, Good morning. Nasia, still somewhat bewildered, couldn't help but ask, Professor, what are all these? Professor Matt replied, These are all documents that will help determine your future. Hearing this, Nasia was completely taken aback, not expecting something so significant, and exclaimed, My future. Matt explained, Yes, this is all to help Miss decide her future path. The professor also expressed his excitement and admiration, mentioning that all of this had the support of the master. Nasia understood, but still somewhat dubious. She wondered if the professor really intended to explain everything today. The professor replied that a single day wouldn't be enough, and the remaining content would be covered in the next lesson. However, Nashia's true intention wasn't this at all. She simply wanted to lie down and rest. Then, the two began their lesson. But after a considerable amount of time, the professor decided to close the documents, saying, "Let's stop here for now. I wonder if there are any fields you are particularly interested in." Nashia sighed, replying, "I'm not sure. Nothing really grabs my attention." Professor Matt, with a worried look on his face, said, "I've shown you almost all the materials I brought." Suddenly, Nashia's attention fell upon a book with a red cover, and she curiously asked, "What's that last book?" Matt replied, "That's a theoretical book on the field of magic technology." Nashia picked up the book and began to read curiously, even asking, "What kind of magic technology will it teach? What will I learn?" Suddenly, as she flipped to a certain page, the young lady's eyes widened in surprise. Professor Matt told her that if Miss took a look, she would understand, but it didn't seem suitable to introduce to her, so he had originally intended to leave it aside. Magic technology includes weapons development, war preparations, and the enhancement of military power. This field mainly focuses on developing weapons for war. That sounds interesting. So Nashia decided, "I'll choose this." The professor, hearing this, seemed a little disappointed. Nashia clutched the book tightly, indicating her resolve. "From now on, I will study magic technology." She thought to herself, "This is the lifeline to save myself. As long as Akin remains in the Lilo family, the Caligula Empire's human bioweapon experiments won't easily succeed. However, if the human bioweapon experiments somehow succeed, the Caligula Empire will wage war. To prevent that, I will create a weapon to protect my life with my own two hands." Returning to Nashia's choice of study, Professor Matt clearly expressed his true thoughts, stating that magic technology wasn't a major field, and it wasn't a path he'd recommend for the young lady. Despite hearing this, Nashia cheerfully replied, "It doesn't matter. Even if it's not a major field, I still want to learn it." She eagerly added, "So, shall we begin studying today?" But the professor replied, "It might be difficult to start right away. We need to invite a specialized teacher in magic technology." Hearing this, Miss Nashia readily agreed, nodding, "All right, then please invite the best, most expert teacher to help me." The scene shifts to a dark street. Two figures cloaked in black are scouting something. They encounter a vagrant on the street and thoroughly inspect him, realizing he doesn't seem to be the child they're looking for. Annoyed, they mutter, "It seems he's not in this area either. Number 13, that little rat. Where could they be hiding?" It turns out these two shadowy figures are Tendai and Andrew, mercenaries from the Kurwa Empire. Tendai says, "I thought it was strange when it escaped our encirclement, but I didn't expect it to vanish without a trace. Like this," Andrew adds. By then, the number of our comrades killed by number 13 during its escape had already reached dozens. "We just need to find it." Then, Andrew slams his fist against a nearby rock in frustration, exclaiming, "This is such a mess." Tendai says, "Let's put aside our personal feelings for now. I heard from our superiors that the abilities number 13 displayed were quite impressive. They say capturing number 13 could significantly accelerate the experiments." And Drew says confidently, "So what if it possesses monstrous strength? As long as I have this, no matter how powerful it is, it won't be of any use." Then, the mercenary reveals some sort of secret weapon. Tendai says, "I heard that's supposed to be a tranquilizer." Andrew replies, "That's right. They say no experimental subject has been able to escape it. Anyway, as long as we keep number 13 alive, even if it's missing an arm or a leg, it won't affect the experiment." Tendai replies nonchalantly, "Sure, whatever you say. Besides, you'll receive the signal soon. We've been searching all day and still haven't found it." Tendai continues, "If we can't find it in the white zone either," Andrew grunts, saying, "Are we really going to have to go all the way to the capital? I hear it's difficult to move around there. Very complex." Tendai replies, "It doesn't matter where it hides. Even if it takes more time, we'll definitely find it eventually." Andrew still seems doubtful. "True, but do you know why it ran away? If we knew the reason for its escape, we might be able to search in the right places." Hearing this, Tendai speculates. How could we possibly know the thoughts of an experimental subject? It probably just didn't like the place. On a beautiful morning at Atkins' home, he is tending his garden when suddenly someone calls his name. Startled, Atkin turns around. A maid, holding a child of about 2 years old, asks him, "Excuse me, could you watch this child for me? I'm very busy today." This little one didn't realize how fast her mother was running and chased her all the way here. The child is still shyly clinging to the maid's skirt. Atkin stares at the child, a clear look of awkwardness and tension on his face. Atkin flashes back to his past, his sorrowful childhood. He remembers his time in the laboratory, wearing the jersey with the number 13. He stayed in a private room for a long time, outstanding experimental results categorized separately. After years of isolation, I finally reunited with the experimented children. Just like me, at first, I wasn't worried about whether anyone remained there, but a small hand tugged at my shirt. The boy said with a smile, "Hey, I'm number 1890, and you're number 13, right? What did you get here?" I kept staring at the boy's innocent, adorable face. Then a girl with long, shimmering red hair walked over and said, "Number 13 was here before you arrived." Hearing this, the boy made a surprised expression and said, "So, he's been here for a long time, hasn't he? But why can't he talk?" I just sat there quietly, without saying a word. The red-haired girl told the boy that she had never heard me speak. Even when she talked to me, I wouldn't answer. Then she asked number 1743, "Have you ever heard him talk?" But the boy also replied, "Never." All three children stood there, thinking for a long time. Then they played all sorts of pranks to try and cheer me up, like braiding my hair. The children, so innocent, chattered amongst themselves. "I have braided his hair. How did you do that? Hey, arm wrestle with me." Even though I acted indifferent and aloof, the children still innocently approached me. For the first time, I felt the warmth of another person. I gradually opened my heart. One time, the boy, number 1890, asked me why I was here, and I just blankly, instinctively replied that I had no memories of my childhood. The boy also innocently said, "Me neither. What about you, 1691? The girl replied, "Someone gave me bread and said they would provide a place to stay, so I followed them." The boy, 1743, said, "My mother brought me here. She said she'll come back for me if our family situation improves." Hearing this, the two children innocently said, "Really? That's great. Then I want to leave this place too." The children in the laboratory were all like that, orphans without parents, or children sold off by their parents due to difficult circumstances. The children were completely unaware of their situation. This scene, like looking back at my younger self, made my heart ache. The boy also asked me if I had a name, and I honestly told him I didn't. Then they excitedly discussed amongst themselves, deciding they wanted to give me a name. They had already given number 1691 a name. Because they were just children, I wanted to protect them someday. The red-haired girl painfully told me she had been coughing up blood. I could only lower my head and say it was a side effect of the experiments. But in reality, the girl's health was in a serious condition. I held the little girl tightly, comforting her. "It's okay. Everything will be all right. It will get better soon." Then, the administrator suddenly came to the room, calling for number 1691. "It's your turn to go to the research lab now." I held the girl tightly, thinking painfully. However, protecting someone from that hell wasn't an easy task. Seeing this, the administrator asked, "What are you doing, number 13? Then he roughly pulled the girl away, saying, "This is number 1691. The girl struggled and cried, begging, "I don't want to go, I don't want to go." At that moment, I tried to grab the girl's wrist tightly, saying, "She already said she doesn't want to go. She already said she doesn't want to go." The administrator yelled angrily, "Where did this brat come from? What friendship game are you playing?" He even raised his hand to hit us. Suddenly, the little girl started coughing up even more blood. Seeing this, he stopped, clicked his tongue, and said, "This won't do." The girl trembled in fear. Then he turned to me and said, "If you really care about 1691 that much, then number 13 should take her place in the experiment. If you do that, 1691 can be exempted from the experiment." He also said, "Just like the other experiments, no matter what it is." I replied that I would do it. Undergoing dozens of experiments, my body rapidly changed. Along with that, I experienced a state of overload, and one day, I fell into a coma, unable to wake up for several days. During that time, something happened. The administrator brought me to a room, and he yelled, "Do something. Get in there." I asked him in confusion, "Wait, what about the children?" I was stunned when I heard him say they had all gone out for experiments. I cried out in despair. "You said if I became the experimental subject in their place, the children would be exempted, didn't you?" He replied with cold indifference. "That was my promise, but these days you've been the most troublesome one." I froze, wondering if they were all right. He calmly answered, "I don't know if you're really curious, but go ask that other experimental subject over there." I turned around in anguish, and then I realized it was number 1890. How could this have happened? I held the boy, and he kept saying to me, "Cold. So cold, I couldn't bear to look at the boy." "Are you cold? How much blood have you lost?" Tears streamed down the boy's face as he trembled in fear and told me, "Brother, I saw the other children who participated in the experiments being loaded onto carts." Hearing this, I was speechless. Hearing the boy ask, "Will I become like that too?" His voice was so faint, and my heart ached even more. At that moment, I was terrified. "I don't want to die." Then the boy closed his eyes forever, his body going limp. I held him tightly, crying and begging them, "Someone please give me painkillers. If not, at least some sedatives. Please." Number 1890 gradually grew cold in my arms. Even without the other children with physical abnormalities, I still had to continue undergoing high-intensity experiments. The laboratory wouldn't allow me to live or die. It would only inflict unbearable pain on my body and mind. Left with nothing, I decided to escape the laboratory. Ironically, thanks to my weaponized body, I was able to escape. However, even after leaving that place, I still didn't gain freedom. When I collapsed, someone sold me into slavery. The person who became my master continued the human weapon experiments. The outside wasn't much different from the laboratory. Switching to the present, the adorable boy asked Akin, "Brother, I want that apple." Akin immediately picked up the boy. He kept thinking about something. Images of nature appeared in his mind. Akin thought to himself, "No, it's been a little different from the start. What is she thinking about?" Currently, Tanasia was sitting down, meticulously studying the document she had found. After a while, she closed the book with a sigh. "With this, I've learned all of Vanon's magic technology. Are the books sold on the market like this as well?" After reading magic technology books for several days, I learned a few things. Since magic exists in this worldview, the types of weapons are more diverse than in modern times. Weapons can be divided into two types: conventional weapons made with standard technology and weapons containing magic, made through magic technology. Magic weapons, depending on the type of magic stone used, possess unique spells. For example, if a sword is made with a water elemental magic stone, we can use water spells with that sword. The power level of the weapon will vary depending on the magic stone. Although the power of magic stones is limited, magic weapons, which use mana as an energy source, are inherently more powerful than ordinary weapons. The emergence of magic, depending on the number of espers and magic weapons possessed, creates a disparity in power. A nation's power will change significantly. The problem is, currently, the Aqua Empire doesn't have any espers who can lead a war to victory, nor does it have any magic weapons. Akin had to endure all sorts of human weapon experiments. He possesses artificial fire abilities, as he can control his inextinguishable flames, an energy specifically designed for war. If Akin falls into the Caligula Empire's hands again, at least within the Aqua Empire, no one will be able to stop him. Of course, if he stays by my side, this won't happen. But I don't know how long Akin will be with me, so I need to create a powerful weapon to prepare for the worst-case scenario. Holding a magic research board in her hand, she fell deep into thought. After all, based on her understanding, magic technology required magic stones, but magic stones were too expensive to supply to soldiers. Although it was a powerful weapon, it wasn't widely used. This was probably why magic technology wasn't a core subject. So the Caligula Empire was trying to create human weapons. Lost in her thoughts, she didn't even notice someone entering the room. Her mind wandered. Should we gather magic stones and create a weapon like a nuclear bomb? Or should we create a weapon that even ordinary soldiers could use? Whether it was a nuclear bomb or an ordinary weapon, it would require too much magic power. I wonder if there's anything that can replace magic power. The lady gently approached her and cleared her throat to get her attention. Startled, Tanasia looked up and asked, "Professor Matt, when did you arrive?" The professor replied with a smile, "I arrived a little while ago." What were you thinking about so intently that you didn't even notice me come in? I was just thinking about some random things, she said. This time, the professor had come to give her a surprise. Holding out a small gift box, she said, "Compared to that, I brought what you asked for last time." Nasia asked excitedly, "Really?" The box opened, revealing a very lovely bracelet. "Here, this is a bracelet made with magic stones." Nasia took the bracelet and asked, "This bracelet contains some kind of power, right?" Then the professor gave her the real surprise, replying, "Miss, you can ask the person who made it directly." Nasia looked perplexed, not understanding. Someone else made it? The classroom door opened, and a man in dirty clothes walked in. Nasia tilted her head, wondering who the other person was. Professor Matt spoke up. "Please come in, Professor." Gesturing towards the man, she introduced, "Miss, as I mentioned, I brought the magic engineering professor. He's very famous here. His name is Vanessa Tennant." The familiar name made her jump in surprise. If she remembered correctly, wasn't Vanessa the one who wrote the entire Vannon's Magic Technology series? The old man nodded, acknowledging, "That's right, I wrote those books." He truly was the magic engineering expert of the Aqua Empire. Nasia gasped, covering her mouth in excitement. "Oh my goodness." She immediately straightened up and said, "It's such an honor. I've read all of your books recently, and they've really helped me a lot. Because I've been studying for a while, my hair is a mess." She nervously tidied herself. "Oh, look at my hair. I forgot to introduce myself. My name is..." But before she could finish, the old professor cut her off with a sigh. "I know, the eldest daughter of Marquis Bello, Lady Nasia Bello." He grumbled impatiently. "If I didn't know Marquis Bello a favor, I wouldn't have been dragged to a place like this." Facing her puzzled expression, the old professor bluntly replied, "I heard from Matt that you're a genius. But after all, for a noble lady, studying is just a hobby. Regrettably, I don't intend to participate in this kind of game today. I just came to see you and refuse in person. From now on, tell your father that you'll be studying other fields." His words made Matt flustered. "Professor, you promised to teach her before. What are we supposed to do if you say that?" Just then, Nasia quickly picked up a book and said, "Please wait a moment." Flipping back to the page she had bookmarked, she said, "If I had the chance to meet Professor Vannon in person, I would have a lot of questions to ask." She calmly walked over and presented the page to him, asking, "Right here in this section, I don't understand why it's explained this way." The old professor hadn't expected the young lady to actually be serious about studying. He looked at the line she had marked in red. It was a specialized section of magic technology, so it certainly wasn't easy to understand. "But why are you curious about this? This doesn't seem like something a noble lady needs to know." Nasia looked him straight in the eyes and asked, "And what does that have to do with it?" She stated, "My status and studying magic technology are two separate matters." Her expression was firmer than ever as she asserted her genuine desire to understand even the most in-depth parts. She was utterly serious about studying magic technology. Her fervor took the old professor by surprise. He looked at Matt and said, "It seems she really wants to learn." "She wasn't lying," Professor Matt replied. "Of course, why would I lie about this?" Professor Tennant muttered, "I thought she was exaggerating, trying to fool a naive old man like me." Finally, he walked over to the table and said, "Bring it here. I'll only explain it once." This made Nasia overjoyed, and she immediately replied, "Okay." After they had been studying for a while, a servant knocked on the door. "Excuse me, miss, but Miss Verisa is here to see you." Surprised, she turned and asked, "What's with the sudden visit?" The servant explained, "It's the monthly gathering today, so she came." Nasia thought to herself, so there were gatherings like this before. Though I detest it, we're still friends on the surface. She instructed the servant to tell Verisa, "Wait in my room for a bit. I'll be there after the lesson. Hopefully, she'll understand." Verisa, upon being told this, was furious. "What? Make me wait?" The maid bowed her head and said sincerely, "I apologize, but the miss suddenly had a lesson." Verisa crossed her arms, grumbling, "I understand. Hurry up and bring the tea." "Yes, miss," the maid replied and went to prepare it. Verisa had never been left waiting like this before. Gritting her teeth, she reminded herself that pretending to be friendly was advantageous, which was why she hadn't missed the regular meetings and had come here. Since she's the daughter of the owner of this place, she blatantly ignores me. Suddenly, there was a knock. She wondered what it was and who it could be this time. A familiar voice came from outside the door. "It's me, master." She recognized the voice immediately. Verisa hurried to open the door and, just as she thought, it was Atkin. She said with a smile, "Hello, we meet again." Verisa grabbed him by the collar of his shirt and pulled him back. "Your face looks happy to see me again, too." "Oh, I remember now. Nasia came to my house not long ago and hurt one of my servants. It shouldn't be a big deal if I do the same, right? After all, I really enjoy shattering the faces of pretty servants who look like me and making them cry." Hearing her say, "How should we destroy you?" a look of fear crossed his face. Meanwhile, Nasia's studies were progressing very smoothly. She nodded, thinking that after hearing the explanation, she understood much better. Professor Tennant reached for a piece of paper beside her. "We need a piece of paper next. Can I use this one?" She replied, "Of course." While taking out her notebook, she accidentally dropped a drawing that was inside. He picked up the drawing board and looked at it, wondering what it was. Nasia seemed a little uncomfortable. The old professor was very focused as he reviewed the drawing. He asked, "Did you draw this?" She nodded and said with a light laugh, "Yes, I drew it to pass the time. I was imagining what it would be like if it were a weapon." He remained silent, not responding to her playful tone. After a moment, the old professor put the drawing down and asked her to try and explain how she came up with it. Nasia hesitated for a moment, then briefly explained it to him. This was precisely why she picked up a pen and redrew the design based on her explanation. "If you pull the trigger here, it'll release magic." He asked, "Magic? What kind?" "With a small weapon like this, the power must be weak, right?" She quickly replied, "It's about amplifying magical power by adjusting small magical tools. The magical tools can have any attribute, as long as they can generate immense power." After hearing the operating principle, he understood. He took the pen from her and modified some details on the drawing. "Like this, right?" The modified drawing was even more perfect. Taking the drawing, she nodded in amazement and said, "Yes, that's exactly the part one hadn't figured out." Without hesitation, she praised him. "You're amazing." Professor Tennant, a bewildered expression on his face, said, "You came up with this design, and now you're calling me a genius?" Nasia replied candidly, "Because I never considered its practicality." He pointed his pen at her. "Then all you need to do now is study. I've only taken the first step, but as for the next, I'm too old to continue." He folded his arms, lost in thought for a moment. Finally, he spoke. "Miss Bello, I will take you as my student." Nasia, ecstatic, asked, "Really?" He stroked his chin as he answered, "Indeed, I had no other choice, which is why I came here. To be honest, I'm quite interested in you, Mississippi." She rubbed her nose awkwardly. "I didn't expect the professor to be interested in me. This is a big misunderstanding." Professor Tennant quickly clarified, "I wasn't talking about you. I was talking about your drawing." Nasia, who had felt a surge of pride for a few fleeting seconds, quickly deflated at the professor's words. "Let's finish this drawing first. If we can complete it, it might become a powerful weapon." This was exactly what she had envisioned, a good teacher willing to guide her, and it made her incredibly happy. She quickly replied, "Yes, sir." Professor Tennant looked at the person beside him. "Matt, I heard you bought the magic bracelet I made." Professor Matt asked in surprise, "How did you know?" "I didn't. It wasn't cheap to buy that." He held out his hand. "Give me that magic bracelet." Matt hesitated, "But I was planning to give that bracelet to the young miss." He replied, "I know, but I'm going to give my student an assignment." The old professor's first assignment for her was to figure out what power the bracelet held. She wanted to refuse, but the old man started to fuss, saying, "If my student doesn't even know this, wouldn't it damage my reputation?" He suggested that before their next lesson, she should research the principles and usage of the bracelet on her own. On her way back to her room, Nasia looked at the bracelet, thinking that she had said she wanted to learn more about it, but she didn't know where to start. Reaching her door, she suddenly noticed something odd about the maid standing there. She approached and asked what was wrong. The maid was so frightened she stammered, unable to form a coherent sentence. "Miss," it's a loud crash from inside the room interrupted the maid and caught Nasia's attention. At that moment, she remembered she had a guest waiting in her room. Nasia flung open the door in a panic. A chill ran down her spine at the sight before her. Atkin lay in a pool of blood, Verisa standing over him, a blood-stained magic staff in her hand. She looked calm, yet sighed. "Like this again?" Her eyes instantly darkened. Unfazed, Verisa continued her rant. "Come and see what gift I brought you. I made it especially for you. I heard that if you get hit by this staff, it hurts to the bone." Atkin's trembling body lay on the floor as Verisa said cheerfully, "The funny thing is it makes a pleasant sound too." She raised the staff high, asking if Nasia wanted to try it. The heavy staff slammed down towards Atkin, but suddenly she couldn't move. She was wondering what had just happened when Nasia suddenly appeared beside her. her. She slapped Verisa hard across the face. The action was unbelievable to everyone, especially the injured Akin lying on the floor. Nasia's forceful slap sent Verisa stumbling, dropping the staff. Clutching her cheek, she asked Nasia what she had just done. Picking up the staff, Nasia said nothing and swung it down. Verisa gasped and screamed, but stopped abruptly as the staff halted just beside her. Nasia sighed deeply. She threw the staff to the ground, astounded that Verisa would consider this a gift. "It seems you're even more shallow than I thought." At those words, Verisa jumped up. "What did you say? Shallow? Have you forgotten who it was that used to interact with the servants at the Richter mansion?" Nasia crossed her arms. "Whatever happened in the past is in the past. I won't do that anymore." Her gaze was sharp, laced with a clear threat. "So I'm warning you, if you dare touch anyone of mine again, I won't be so lenient next time." Atkin looked at her, surprised by her fierce protectiveness. Verisa, still sitting on the floor, tried to argue. "What are you going to do now? Try to ostracize me from high society?" Nasia frowned. "Is it necessary to go that far? Think about it yourself. I am a young miss of the Bello family. I have any number of ways to get rid of you." The thinly veiled threat truly frightened Verisa. "I'm Richter's daughter. You can't do this to me. Am I even less than that servant?" Nasia's reply was ice cold. "Think whatever you like." Realizing her precarious position, Verisa, fuming, snatched up her skirts and stormed out, not forgetting to deliver a classic villainous parting shot. "Nasia, you'll regret this day." Nasia calmly folded her arms. "I'll be waiting." Only after the door slammed shut did she remember Atkin, still lying injured beside her. Nasia rushed to his side. "Are you all right? How badly are you hurt?" She called out to her maid. "Janine, quickly, get a doctor." The maid responded, "Yes, miss," and hurried away. Nasia gently tried to help Atkin up. "Let me help you. Can you stand?" Just then, Atkin asked, Why did you help me?" The question gave her pause. His bruised and swollen face repeated the question. Why would the young miss stand up for me like that? How could? His whispered words were too soft for her to hear clearly. After uttering the question, he could no longer hold on and fainted. Nasia cried out his name in alarm. "Atkin!" She tried to rouse him. In a hazy state of semi-consciousness, Atkin felt like he was running. The familiar sensation told him instantly that it was that dream again. The dream where two strangers were chasing him. "My body feels so heavy," the pursuers laughed, seeing they were about to catch him. He knew it, but he couldn't run anymore. He was certain to be caught. Just as his legs gave out, a black hand grabbed him and pulled him away. The scene before him shifted, and when he could see again, he saw his master, Nasia, wearing black gloves. She put a finger to her lips, signaling him to be quiet. Atkin's eyes widened, staring at her, stunned for a moment. The next morning, he slowly opened his eyes. He found himself lying in a soft bed, a damp cloth resting on his forehead. A woman's voice came from beside the bed. "Are you awake?" Nasia looked down at him, asking, "Are you all right?" The question made him blush. He lowered his gaze, asking if I'm all right. "But what happened?" Nasia said, "Don't you remember? You fainted. Do you know how scared I was?" Now he vaguely recalled the events of yesterday. "That's right. Miss Verisa hit me." He clutched his shoulder, his body stiffening reflexively. He gripped it tighter, thinking that if anyone else discovered his injuries, he might have to leave this place sooner than planned. They would find out about him. A warm hand touched his forehead. Atkin asked abruptly, "Miss, what are you doing?" Her other hand touched her own forehead, comparing temperatures. "Just checking if your fever has gone down." "Be still." Though hesitant, he did as she asked. After checking, Nasia said cheerfully, "Good. It seems your fever has subsided a lot." The man's face flushed crimson, unsure if it was from the lingering fever or embarrassment. "If that's the case, Miss, please take your hand away. I feel a little uncomfortable." She quickly lifted her hand. The air between them thickened with awkwardness. A strange thought flitted through Nasia's mind. She actually felt like teasing him. "Wait, Atkin, if you keep sweating like this, your fever will come back." She reached out to unbutton his shirt. Startled, he caught her hand. "I'll do it myself." "After you go out," she asked curiously. "Why?" "It's not like it's the first or second time you've changed clothes in front of me." He mumbled that it was different then. His hand still gripped her wrist. Nasia, not understanding, asked him what he meant, what was different. A teasing smile played on her lips. "What? Are you shy now?" Atkin's reaction was indignant. "Who should be shy? His flustered response made her laugh. He blushed, asking why she was laughing. Tanasia sat up straighter, composing herself. Your reaction was just funny. I was only teasing. I really wasn't going to undress you, so don't misunderstand. If I really did that, it would cause a huge problem. He watched her silently for a moment, his mind replaying the events of the previous day, how she had stood up for him, threatening Verisa that she wouldn't be so forgiving next time. He tightened his grip on her wrist. Miss, why did you do that? She looked at him, puzzled. Why are you angry? Because I teased you. He shook his head. No, I don't understand why you did that to Miss Verisa. Tanasia's eyes widened in surprise. She asked him softly why he hadn't fought back, that he could have easily avoided the situation. He explained, because I was afraid I would put Miss in an awkward position. So you were afraid that if you fought back, Miss Richter would find out. Is that right? He nodded, confirming her understanding. Yes. Tanasia's tone became serious. If that's the case, then I have all the more reason to protect you. I told you before, you're mine. You are my beginning. I won't stand for anyone hurting you so carelessly. It was an answer he never expected, the most touching words he had ever heard. He sighed softly. It's unbelievable. For a lady like you. His unfinished compliment made her look up at him. Their eyes met, and she smiled, asking, do you understand now? Then she wiggled her wrist, a pained expression crossing her face. However, Atkin, could you please let go of my hand now? He quickly released his grip. Oh, I'm sorry. Now that his hand was free, he noticed the other bracelet she wore. Why are you wearing that bracelet? He asked. She held up the bracelet, asking if he knew about it. Yes, I know a little, he admitted honestly. Magic items are dangerous, so you should dispose of it. She shook her head, disagreeing. No, I can't. I have an assignment from a teacher. Atkin questioned, an assignment? She nodded. Yes, I've been studying magic technology recently. The professor wants me to study this bracelet myself. He looked worried. She doesn't know anything and keeps wearing such a dangerous thing. Tanasia pulled out a book, countering his concern. What are you talking about? The theory, however, is clear. She analyzed the bracelet. Judging by the color of the magic stone, it's highly likely to be of the light attribute, and the bracelet is made of silver. However, silver isn't a suitable material for expensive magic stones, so there must be a reason for using silver. Atkin asked, do you know about the locks magic engineers invented to prevent the theft of technological products? She nodded, confirming that she did, and that if one carelessly touched the lock, it would explode. She knew all of this, yet she was still pursuing the assignment. Tanasia reassured him. It's all right. Although the professor is eccentric, there must be a reason for giving this assignment. He sighed. I understand, Mississippi. Just be careful and do what you need to do. His fluctuating emotions, shifting between concern and resignation, were difficult for her to understand. Are you worried, Atkin? Who worries over such a heated argument? His reaction, burying his face in the blankets, made Tanasia cover her mouth to stifle a laugh. He mumbled into the bedding, embarrassed. Well, miss, think what you want. But it's quite amusing to see you being so dishonest. Seeing that he was no longer worried, she stood to leave. Since you're awake, I'll be going. Call me if you need anything. Atkin lay in bed, watching her go, his gaze following her form. Her words echoed in his mind, that she wouldn't stand for anyone hurting him so carelessly. He pulled the sheets tighter, closing his eyes, whispering to himself. Hearing those words had brought him a sense of peace, but he told himself not to dwell on it. He would be leaving anyway. Taking a deep breath, he opened his eyes again. After a while, there wouldn't be any more opportunities to see her. Miss Tanasia, even though you've made up your mind, you still can't help but look extremely sorrowful. Tanasia sat at her desk, absorbed in solving the exercises her teacher had given her, while Atkin recovered. She lowered her gaze to the bracelet on her wrist, wondering if the bracelet had an original owner or if she was the first person to remember it. If you're the first person, put a drop of blood on this magic stone. If it already has an owner, the lock will activate and explode. Even though the teacher is eccentric, he wouldn't give an assignment that involves risking one's life. The reason for giving this task doesn't mean experimenting with a 50-50 probability. She thought for a moment. Then, what are his expectations of me? If I start from that question, I might know what I need to do. Judging by the color of the magic stone or the use of a material called silver, this bracelet is likely a light magic bracelet. But I can't be certain until I try it myself. Even if the answer is light magic, if it's just speculation, then the answer becomes meaningless. She told the teacher, it's light magic. This means I have to take off the bracelet to check if it's an item with an owner, and if it doesn't have an owner, I'll activate it myself to see if it is light magic. With this thought, a smile of excitement spread across her face. All right, let's give it a try. She worked diligently, consulting her books first, then meticulously examining the bracelet. The dark circles under her eyes were prominent. She asked Akin, "Is it all right now?" Akin replied, "Yes, it's done." Another day passed, and Geron came in to call her for a meal, but she refused. Maybe later. Geron reluctantly left the room, and then Akin approached. She called for Akin, and he inquired about how the young miss was doing. She responded dejectedly. She hasn't left her room today, either. When I told her it was time to eat, she just told me to leave the food at the door and go. So I'm really worried. After listening, he replied, "Let me talk to Mississippi." He went over and knocked on Nasia's door. "Miss, are you not going out today, either? You shouldn't keep skipping meals, Mississippi." She responded, just as Geron had described, "Just leave it at the door. I'll eat when I'm ready." Hearing that, "You don't seem happy. Are you starting to threaten me now? All the food outside the door is untouched. If you don't eat this time, I'll report it to your father." "Miss, what are you going to do?" These words startled Nasia. You imagine what your father would say after finding out. "Nasia, you haven't been eating properly for days, have you?" She took off her glasses, pausing. Since things had come to this, she wanted to end it. She told Akin, "If you threaten me like that, I'll have no choice." Then she opened the door. "I've figured it out, so bring the food in quickly." She smiled. He looked at her lifeless face and sighed. Even Geron was startled, exclaiming, "Miss, you'll collapse at this rate." Geron fussed over her attentively. "Is something the matter?" She hasn't left her room for ages. If this continues, there will be a big problem. Suddenly, Nasia called out, "Hey, Geron." The maid replied cheerfully, "Yes, miss? What do you need?" She sighed. "Can I go out for a bit? My head is spinning terribly, and I already feel full." Geron nodded. "All right, I'll be waiting outside. Call me if you need anything." She agreed. "Okay." At that, Nasia began to eat. She thought to herself, she wasn't sure when she had started eating with Akin, the cook always preparing meals for the two of them. She glanced at him. He was still eating calmly, and then she spoke first. "It's been a while since I've eaten like this. How have you been lately?" He replied indifferently, "I'm the same as always." She asked again, "Really? Are you saying you're okay?" He replied, "Yes." Nasia pressed further, eating well, but he only answered with a single word, "Yes." She was at a loss for words, thinking, I feel like I've seen this scene somewhere before. Seeing him so reticent, she wasn't very pleased. Why the sudden change? Akin is usually a bit more brusque than she blurted out. "I have some work to finish, so I might miss the next meal again. But I'll prepare something for you. I'll talk to the cook later. Make sure you eat well, okay?" Akin furrowed his brow slightly, a hint of frustration in his expression. "Yes, I understand." A while after they finished eating, Atkins suddenly called out, "Mississippi." She was reading something, holding a paper, and only looked up when she heard him. He hesitated at first, but after a moment, he continued, "Even if you eat alone, please eat well. Don't hurt yourself." Nasia was taken aback, as she hadn't expected him to say such a thing. After composing herself, she replied, "I understand." She lowered her head and thought, he seems different today. Is something the matter? After finishing her assignment, she'd have to talk to him about it tonight. She put on the bracelet and went out to the garden, confirming it had no owner. So now all that was left was to activate it. If I use magic anywhere, I might wake everyone up. I should try testing it somewhere where there are no people. Would that be enough? Suddenly, she saw a figure shrink back behind a tree. "Who's that?" On the other side, she called out. After the boy came out, she couldn't help but be surprised. "Is that Tren?" Though not publicly known, Tren was one of the best swordsmen in the Empire, and one of the supporting characters favored by the Saintess. She furrowed her brow in worry. "I have to explain this clearly so he doesn't misunderstand." Suddenly, another set of footsteps approached. A familiar figure emerged. "What's wrong, Akin?" She was surprised at the person walking in front. "Akin? No, it's me. What's going on here?" Tren drew his sword. "Who are you? If you don't answer, I'll kill you." He lowered his eyes, a handbag still clutched in his hand. Nasia was touched. "A handbag? Is that really Akin?" She recalled his words. Even if she eats alone, she should eat well. No wonder it had felt strange. She had intended to stop Tren immediately, but it seemed that wouldn't work now. She pricked her index finger with a sharp needle. If Akin had plans to run away, she would have to pay the price for that crime. "I don't know." She took off her bracelet. "Begin." At that moment, a light suddenly flared. Tren abruptly shielded his eyes. Even Akin found the light hard to bear. Suddenly, a hand grabbed his wrist. Tanasia called out, "Akin, come with me." She pulled Akin straight back to the house. He followed silently, his mind a whirlwind of thoughts. That guy completely blocked me, leaving no openings. If we fought, I definitely wouldn't have one. He clutched the bag tightly. Why did I have to run into someone like that today, of all days? Is this running away too? Now, he looked at the girl in front of him, then down at their joined hands. Should we let go? Suddenly, Tanasia interrupted his chaotic thoughts, calling out, "Akin, hide in my room first." He froze for a moment, then she pulled him inside, shutting the door and finally releasing a breath. Then she asked, "Were you really planning to run away?" He hesitated for a moment before speaking, "Yes. She'll probably blame me, thinking that after she showed me all that kindness, she didn't expect me to be so ungrateful. Even if she experimented on me or mistreated me like she used to, I wouldn't have anything to say." He thought to himself, "Either way, it'll be difficult to go back to our previous good relationship." Suddenly, he paused. Such a good relationship. Tanasia placed her hands on the table. "So you came up with such a momentous plan, perfectly concealed it without any flaws. You didn't trust me, regardless, right? How sad." As she spoke, she gathered the pearl strings on the table. "Give me the bag." The sudden command startled him. She took his bag and placed the pearl strings inside. "How long were you planning to live off this meager amount? If you don't want to be discovered after losing your identity, you need far more savings. If I were you, I would have taken everything in this room already." Akin asked cautiously, "Are you saying I should steal?" She turned around. "You were planning to run away anyway. Did you know that if runaway slaves are caught, their Achilles tendons are severed?" She picked up another string of pearls. "Now go and get back to him. Even if another charge of theft is added, it doesn't matter. Just take it." He truly didn't understand. "What is she doing right now?" She answered bluntly, "Can't you tell? I'm preparing the money for your escape." "What else?" He frowned. "Letting me run away? Why are you doing this?" She looked at him and said, "Just helping you. That's why I'm asking why." "Why are you helping me like this?" he asked again. "This miss has probed my body before, even before she asked me how I obtained my strength. I don't know everything, but if you want, I'll tell you everything." She froze, thinking, "Why are you still thinking that way?" "It's true, I brought it up a few times, but now I no longer care about those strange things you kept asking about. So, why exactly is Miss helping me so much?" She replied, "I just want to help you." Akin's expression didn't improve in the slightest. "Do you believe what I'm saying now?" She was speechless. It really didn't seem real. She sighed in exasperation. "Yes, in the beginning, I was trying to get on your good side. It wasn't because of anything related to your body, but because I wanted to build a relationship with you. But the nicer I was to you, the more I saw your bewildered expression. I figured you were just a normal teenager." Akin's eyes widened as he saw her smile. "So, the reason for being nice to you gradually disappeared. Now it's all gone." He was silent for a moment before replying, "So that's it? It's all over?" She shrugged. "That's the whole story. If you have any more questions, I have nothing more to say." Akin turned around, tightening the straps of his bag. Suddenly, a strange noise came from outside the door. Tanasia frowned. It seemed someone had woken up. She took his hand again. "I know you want to run away, but not today. I'll find a way for you to get out. You never know, so take more clothes and food, okay?" With that, she pulled him along. She stopped in front of the wardrobe, saying, "I'll get you a coat. Take it out and think it over carefully. This size should fit you well." She casually put her arm around Akin, pulling up the hood, reminding him, "If you're caught with luggage, you'll be suspected. Wear this and go back to your room." He blushed, speechless for a moment. She tied the ribbon at the neckline, making sure no one would notice. "If anyone finds out, just say it was my request, and I'll handle everything." He suddenly asked, "Do you really want to help me escape?" She still didn't stop what she was doing. "Well, if not, then why would I be doing all this?" She lowered her head, a flicker of sadness visible at first glance. "However, it's a little regrettable. I thought our relationship had improved a lot." Hearing this, Akin's eyes widened. She smiled gently. "If possible, I'd like to keep you by my side and protect you. It's just that I think this is what you want to do, so I won't stop you, okay? You're all tied up now. Don't go down the middle, go to the end of the hallway, and remember to take the back door." "Got it." She peeked out, watching him. "See you tomorrow." Akin walked down the path alone, lost in thought. He silently replayed her words in his mind. "Can't you tell? I'm preparing the money for your escape. What else? I just want to help you." His steps slowed, recalling the story she told him when he asked why she was being so kind to him. and why that reason had disappeared. He lowered his head, walking quietly. But the image of her smiling, hoping their relationship would improve, kept flashing through his mind. He suddenly straightened up, stopping in his tracks. He raised his hands to cover his face. Both face and hands flushed red. Atkins seemed to be wavering. The next day, Tanasia sat alone, sipping her tea. The house was quiet, making last night's chaos feel like a lie. I'm pretending I don't know anything, but I can't shake this feeling. I used a magic bracelet last night, and that's not something easily obtained. No matter how I think about it, I can't deny that I used that bracelet. Why would that person do such a thing? She was lost in thought when a knock came at the door. "Miss, the Lord is looking for you." She remained silent, offering no response. After a moment, she went to open the door. "Why, Trent of all people?" He said, "Please come to the head of the household's office." She followed him resignedly, knowing from the novel that Trent was a man of few words, but she hadn't expected him to be this silent. Look at him, he's the same type as Akin. When they arrived, he knocked and announced, "Lord, Miss Tanasia has arrived." Olin commanded, "Come in." Trent murmured to her, "Miss, please hurry." She smiled faintly, thanking him, thinking clearly, he's even more intimidating than Akin. Then she opened the door and entered. "Father." Olin looked up. "You've come, Tanasia." He smiled. "Sit there and wait for me to finish reading this." She smiled back. "All right, Father, take your time." Observing his face, she thought, "Father looks tired. She's been handling a lot of paperwork for you, Dad. Are you very busy? Could it be because of what happened last night that you didn't sleep?" Olan interrupted hertots. "Tanasia, I heard that Trent saw a suspicious person last night, but because someone used magic, they escaped." Her smile turned awkward and unsightly. He looked at the documents, but still asked, "Do you have anything to say about this?" Tanasia remained silent, knowing her father knew it was her, and he was giving her a chance to explain. After a moment, she said dejectedly, "Yes, it was me who used light magic outside the mansion last night. Things will only get more complicated if I clumsily lie." He said, "Matt said nothing has been engraved on the magic bracelet yet." She explained, "Teacher Wayne gave me an assignment, so I took off the bracelet yesterday to add a new formula. I was going to check if it worked." He glanced up. "So soon? You haven't been studying magic techniques for very long." She replied, "It's the subject I chose. I enjoy it very much. That's why I'm so invested." He chuckled. "Truly enjoy it? How fortunate." She feigned a question. "But was there a suspicious person intruding into the mansion last night?" He sighed. "No, there are no signs of a break-in, nor any traces of someone sneaking out." She smiled. "So, perhaps he mistook her for someone from the house." Hearing this, he paused his writing. "Someone from the house?" She replied, "Yes, I wanted to use the magic right away last night, but I was afraid of waking everyone up, so I went outside. It was too dark when I went out, so I called for a servant, but couldn't find anyone. Perhaps that's why." She thought, Trent saw Atkins' shadow last night. He could tell it wasn't an adult, just an adolescent. Her father probably knew as well. What I want to hide isn't Atkins' identity, but the fact that he wants to run away. It would be more reasonable to admit the truth to some extent. He sat for a long moment, then stood up. "What you're saying makes sense, but this is where you and Nosha live, not anyone else. Father will look into it carefully to ensure the mansion is as secure as possible. Even if one of your servants is acting suspiciously, Father will investigate." Hearing this, she seemed displeased. Olin continued, "Since my child has said so, I'll let it slide this time." She suddenly looked up, and he went on, "But there won't be a next time. If something like this happens again, I will, of course, have to investigate thoroughly. Anyone acting suspiciously will be expelled from the mansion." She smiled. "All right, I understand." A sense of relief washed over her. Suddenly, she hesitated slightly. "Father, there's something I need to tell you." He sat down opposite her. "Go ahead." She smiled. "Could you prepare a research lab for me, Father?" He looked surprised. "A research lab? What?" She explained, "Yes, for studying magic techniques. It's very inconvenient to study at home. To prevent incidents like last night from happening again, this is also necessary." He pondered for a moment. After a while, he gave a gentle smile. "All right, I'll have a lab built for you." She jumped up. "Did you say you'd build one?" He said, "That's right. You said you want to study properly, but we only have one building. I'll discuss it with the experts." Hearing this, she smiled and thanked her father. At that moment, Trent had just come from behind. He looked at her, frowning in thought. After she left, he said to Lord Olin, "My lord, what the young miss said is correct, but I'm certain she's hiding something." He replied, "Well, I don't know what she's hiding, but I warned you before. It seems the girl is also working hard at studying magic techniques, so I'll overlook this matter." But seeing he wanted to say more, Trent raised his head. He turned around, smiling. "Isn't Nasia a lot like me?" He stared at him, puzzled, and asked again. The man continued, "I thought she would be afraid to talk about last night, but instead she asked for a lab to be prepared. I can sense the spirit of a merchant's negotiation in that girl. Very well, perhaps I shouldn't be teaching her magic techniques, but business acumen instead." Silly girl. Just then, there was a knock. "My lord, the tea is ready." He looked surprised. "Tea," the servant replied. "Miss Nasia instructed us. This tea has the effect of relieving fatigue." He felt a warmth spread through him. "Put in the back." Nasia returned to her room, and Jaren prepared a hearty dinner for her, saying, "If you need anything else, just call me." She smiled and thanked him. After Jaren left, she finally breathed a sigh of relief. Her father had said he would let last night's incident slide, and now she felt a little lighter. Olin isn't someone to go back on his word. His principle is that trust between people is paramount. In other words, if this happens again, it will be difficult for Atkin to avoid punishment. If we want Atkin to escape, everything must be carefully prepared. She was lost in thought. Suddenly, a voice called out, "Miss, it's me." She said, "Come in." The person who walked in was Atkin. She froze. What? Is Atkin unable to sleep as well? Is it because of last night? Nasia spoke to Atkin while cutting the food on her plate. She kept asking questions. "Nothing special happened today, did it? Like someone coming to find you or following you? Did you hide the jewels I gave you yesterday? Others might misunderstand, so hide them well." Nasia continued to chatter, but received no response from the person in front of her. She put down her knife and looked at Atkin, calling his name. Hearing her voice, Atkin suddenly flinched. Regaining his composure, he answered her questions. "I've hidden them, and nothing special happened." Hearing this, Nasia smiled. "That's good. You don't have to worry about anything else. I told my father about last night, and he's decided to let it go." Atkins said calmly, "The abilities of the person we encountered yesterday are no joke. Perhaps the Lord has already noticed something strange." The protagonist reassured him. "It's all right. Although I don't know exactly what my father is thinking, it's all over now." He listened to the Lord's words, then looked away, simply replying, "Yes." Nasia was a little puzzled by this. Why was he avoiding her gaze and not eating? Did he still not trust her? After the main course, dessert arrived. The servant informed Nasia, "Miss, the dessert is ready. If you need anything else, please call me." Then she turned and left the room. Nasia waited until the maid's figure disappeared behind the door. Then she turned to Atkin. "There's something I want to show you." Nasia stood and fetched a map, spreading it out before him. She asked, "Have you decided where you're going?" Atkin hesitated. Before he could answer, Nasia pointed at the map. "This is a map of the Arcane Empire. I found a rather nice place for you to live. What do you think of this area?" "I'm asking because it might be a suitable hiding place. I've heard the southern climate is warm, and it's comfortable to live there. Although it's a bit far from the capital, a rural area, the people there are also very sincere. People from other regions have moved there too, so if you live here, it might suit you well." After she finished speaking, Atkin immediately responded, "Miss, so close." His cheeks were now flushed. Startled by the sound of his voice, Nasia quickly stepped back. "I'm sorry." Atkin shyly replied, "It's all right." Nasia observed Atkin's expression, which seemed perplexed. "What's wrong? It looks like he has a fever." Then she asked him if he was all right, if he felt unwell. Atkin replied dejectedly, "I'm Fina." At that moment, Nasia's hand reached towards Atkin's forehead. "Where are you looking? You don't have a fever again, do you?" He immediately caught her hand just before it touched his forehead. Nasia was surprised by this action. "Atkin, what's wrong?" The boy cautiously asked his mistress. "Does Miss do this to other people too?" Nasia was taken aback. "What?" He continued. "I'm asking if Miss takes everyone's temperature like this." Nasia immediately retorted, "What are you talking about? Why would I care if other people have a fever? It's because it's you that I care." The two gazed at each other. Atkin still held his mistress's hand tightly, his eyes sparkling as he looked at her. Noticing he didn't reply, Nasia spoke, "Do you not like having your temperature taken this way?" "No, actually, in comparison, my hand is quite hot now too." Seeing that he had perhaps gone a bit too far, Atkin quickly withdrew his hand. He apologized to his mistress. Nasia touched his hand. "You must have a fever. Akin replied shyly, I don't have a fever. I'm just a little flustered. He suddenly stood up. I'll take note of the places Miss mentioned earlier. I've finished eating, so please excuse me. Seeing the awkwardness between them, Tanasia didn't stop him and casually let him leave. As Akin walked out the door, he ran into the servant, Jaren. Seeing the one who had just hurriedly left, the servant asked his mistress, Miss, did something happen? Tanasia denied it. No. What? Jaren said. Akin's face was completely red. It's the first time I've seen him like that. Tanasia asked curiously, what kind of expression was that? Jaren shook his head. Nothing, Mississippi. It seemed like there was some sort of misunderstanding. Tanasia exclaimed, do you really think I was harassing Akin? Jaren immediately denied it. I didn't say anything, but if you did do that, there's nothing we can do about it. You've been very kind to Akin recently. I was just a little surprised, that's all. Tanasia was shocked. I really didn't do anything. Akin was now back in his room, his face as red as a tomato, wondering how they could have gotten so close without hesitation. I actually lied to Miss yesterday about hiding the jewels. I kept looking at the jewels she gave me over and over. If I hadn't confirmed it with my own eyes, everything would feel like a dream. At that moment, as the sun rose, I fell asleep for the first time. Ever since the day I escaped from the lab, I haven't had any nightmares. Instead, she appeared in my dreams, smiling brightly. However, now, that scent and voice are more real than in a dream. Even now, I still can't believe it. I thought she liked me, even if just a little. He recalled Tanasia's concerned words. Are you satisfied now? Do you understand? If I could, I want to stay by your side and protect you. The phrase echoed repeatedly in Akin's mind. It embarrassed him so much that he had to cover his face with his hands. That young miss was so beautiful, it was vexing. Back with Tanasia, two men came to see her. The man wearing glasses introduced himself. Miss, it's a pleasure to meet you. I'm Robin. The other one said, I'm Tyler. We heard the Marquis wanted to build a laboratory and needed to discuss the details with you. So we came. Tanasia, dressed impeccably, said excitedly, I've been waiting for you as well. Please sit down and let's talk. Thinking back to what my father said, I was to discuss the research laboratory with the specialists. She realized then that these men were indeed the specialist her father had mentioned, invited at his behest. They must be trustworthy. Tanasia asked the two if they had already decided on a location for the laboratory. Robin pulled out his blueprints. Yes, we've selected a suitable location. We avoided areas close to the city, as they might interfere with experiments. We also ruled out places we felt would make transportation inconvenient, such as the outskirts. Looking at the map they provided, Tanasia pointed to a location. In my opinion, the area on the outskirts of the capital is the largest. I like this place the most. Robin asked, wouldn't it be inconvenient to travel back and forth? Tanasia confirmed, yes, this distance is just right. At that moment, Robin added, we brought samples of the interior and exterior designs. Would you like to see them? Tanasia, holding the designs in her hand, observed them carefully. She sighed. This is too ordinary. Robin asked, somewhat surprised, do you have any specific requests? Tanasia replied, yes, it would be great if there were a sandpit in the basement. Also, the more secret passages built to get out unnoticed, the better. I also want a warehouse to store emergency supplies. I want the exterior walls of the building to be built very sturdy, so they won't be affected by any attacks. Hearing this request, both men were a little perplexed. Miss, this sounds like a battlefield, doesn't it? Tyler timidly spoke up. Hearing this, Tanasia smiled gently. Yes, this building is exactly what I want. It can't just be used as a simple laboratory. Tyler cautiously said, if we follow the Miss's suggestions, we must get approval from the royal palace. Robin added, legally speaking, this building could be used to attack the royal palace, so it cannot be built carelessly. Hearing the two young men, Tanasia replied, I know. If we just build a strong wall and build a few secret passages, you're worried about the sandpit, right? Robin flinched and waved his hand. No, on second thought. Miss, you're right. Just adding that is enough. Tyler anxiously added, but if someone accidentally falls in, there could be a problem. Tanasia went on to emphasize, that's why I need everyone. I don't care what the building looks like on the outside, as long as it's as ordinary as possible. The important thing is the inside. If it can be built according to my specifications, that would be best. No one should know. Then she flashed a bright smile. Tanasia was taking a stroll, humming a cheerful tune in a pleasant mood. She recalled that earlier, the two had agreed to her requests. I understand. The Marquis told us to build it according to your wishes. We will bring the designs again. I will also look for the documents you mentioned. Tanasia replied, all right, I look forward to our next meeting. Everything was going her way, and it was all underway. There are more and more ways to avoid death. Things are going too smoothly. Just then, a sound like water came from the garden. Tanasia wondered what the sound was. Over there, Nosha was controlling soft, soothing waves. Following the sound, Tanasia found Nosha practicing. It seems this little sister is really nervous. Tanasia watched worriedly from afar, feeling Nosha could collapse at any moment. Even if Nosha possessed immense, innate magical power, she couldn't train endlessly like this. She glanced at the bracelet on her wrist. To compensate for the weakness of insufficient internal magic, she had to quickly develop a method to continuously use magic through magic stones. If I get closer, I'll only be in the way, so I'll quietly go back. Just then, Nosha's scream came from behind her. The protagonist turned around in surprise and saw Nosha clutching a wound, looking unwell. Tanasia immediately ran over, calling her sister's name. Nosha was surprised. You're here, the protagonist replied. I was just passing by and heard a loud noise, so I came to see. Are you all right? Are you hurt? Nosha honestly replied, yes, I was pouring water into a glass, and it moved. Without waiting for her sister to finish, Tanasia quickly urged her to hold out her hand. Seeing the wound on her sister's hand, she worriedly said, you're bleeding a lot. We need to stop it. Do you have a handkerchief? Or anything else? Nosha said awkwardly, no, I forgot. Even the protagonist, Tanasia, didn't have one. Tanasia hurriedly told her sister, wait a moment, I'll go call a maid. At that moment, it suddenly started pouring rain. Why is it raining at a time like this? Tanasia asked her sister, Nosha, if she could use her abilities to stop the rain. Nosha's face darkened, and she honestly replied, I could have made a water umbrella, but I'm too tired now. I'm sorry. Hearing this, Tanasia had no choice. She lifted her yellow dress and tore a piece off. Nosha was surprised by her sister's actions. The protagonist took the torn fabric and bandaged her sister's wound, saying, stop the bleeding first. Like this. Be careful not to get the wound wet in the rain. Please go inside and call someone. Nosha was still surprised. If you leave now, you'll get soaked in the rain. You don't have to wait. Tanasia said as she ran, don't worry, I'll be right back. Wait under the tree. Nosha's eyes widened in surprise as she looked at the yellow fabric bandaged around her hand. Nosha felt incredibly moved at this moment. In the palace, the servants surrounded Nosha, asking with concern, my lady, did you catch a cold in the rain? Tanasia, on the other hand, was drying her hair with a towel, unnoticed by anyone. Hearing the servant's question, Nosha replied, I only got a little wet. The young lady was having her wound bandaged by the servants. A servant said, I'll prepare the water for your bath, my lady. After she was done, Tanasia got up and went outside. If I hadn't walked by, I don't know what would have happened. Although it wasn't a life-threatening injury, it would have been difficult with the heavy rain and Nosha being alone. She looked down at her hands. They're stained with blood, she thought. I should wash them first. In the bathroom, the protagonist was scrubbing her hands, washing away Nosha's blood, intending to return to her room to rest. Suddenly, she overheard the servants talking. Did you see Lady Nosha's injury? How did she suddenly get hurt before? I heard from others that it seems Lady Tanasia pushed Lady Nosha from behind. Really? It's been really quiet lately. Maybe it's because they're jealous of seeing the young lady practicing her abilities. Tanasia remained silent, her face darkening. No wonder my ears have been itching. It turns out Nosha's servants are talking behind my back. She had to speak up immediately. Then she walked towards the door, but just as she was about to open it, she hesitated. I don't want to explain anymore. If we look at Tanasia's actions in the original story, this claim isn't wrong. There's no need to do those meaningless things. After all, I know very well that my reputation has always been poor, and if I ignore what those who don't truly know me say, I might feel more comfortable. Lost in her thoughts, Tanasia was startled by Nosha's voice cutting through the air. What are you talking about? She got hurt running into the rain because of me. Don't speak carelessly if you don't know the whole story. The servants jumped, visibly startled, as their young mistress spoke up. Miss Nosha, a wave of warmth washed over Tanasia, touched by her sister's defense. Nosha, what are you doing here? The whispers continued, a venomous undercurrent in the room. The truth is, Miss Tanasia has always been the one making things difficult for Miss Nosha. That's right, the gentle miss is back. Nosha's patience finally snapped. Be quiet, she shouted, her voice ringing with authority. Perhaps I misjudged you all. Until now, I've overlooked it, thinking you were just concerned about me, but this is too much. Her voice hardened, a steely edge replacing the gentle tone. You should know that spreading rumors within the estate will have consequences. I'll speak with the steward and ensure appropriate punishments are given. Panic flared in the servants' eyes, their faces paling. Wait, miss, they stammered, fear creeping into their voices. Before they could finish, Nosha cut them off, her voice unwavering. Get out. I want to be alone. The servants scrambled out of the room, a flurry of voiemong to retreating figures. Inside, Natio waited, a knot of tension tightening in her stomach. It's a good thing I waited here. Now I can finally leave. Suddenly, Nosha's voice called out, Sister, are you there? Weren't you? I'm sorry. I didn't see you, so I went looking for you. I didn't expect you to hear all that. I apologize on their behalf. Perhaps I've been too childish lately, so the servants are overprotective. Natia stood silently, her mind racing. After a long pause, she finally spoke. They weren't wrong. You don't need to apologize. She dismissed their words with a wave of her hand. She paid them no mind, and you shouldn't worry about it either. Confusion clouded Nosha's features. Why? I'll be more careful from now on. If you're bothered by something, please tell me honestly, okay? Are you really all right? Why are you practicing alone? You should at least have a servant with you. They must be tired, repeating the same thing for hours on end. Nosha hesitated. You've been practicing for hours. Indeed, the academic conference is coming soon. The word struck Natia like a jolt, a sudden realization dawning. The academic conference. In the original story, those with special abilities gathered periodically every few years to showcase their achievements and skills developed over time. It also served as, hence the name, academic conference. It wasn't a small-scale event limited to the Arcane Empire, but a grand gathering where individuals from surrounding nations would participate. Nosha had always been considered a top prospect, someone with immense potential for growth in a short amount of time. So that's why she's been practicing like that. Natia, he thought to herself. Aloud, she said, You'll wear yourself out, Nosha. I've been trying to maintain my current standing. It's all right. It's just what I've always done. A pang of sadness resonated within Natia at her sister's words. She reached out and gently patted Nosha's head. Surprise flickered across Nosha's face. Sister, are you patting my head? Natia smiled softly, a genuine warmth spreading through her. She felt a surge of pride for her sister's dedication and the words she had spoken. Thank you for everything, Nosha. A wave of emotion washed over Nosha. I'm glad, sister. Honestly, I didn't want to get too involved with Nosha, but she's so sweet and gentle. It makes my heart ache. Natia's thoughts drifted back to the implications of the upcoming conference. If it's the academic conference, then that's where the original story events take place. Nosha and Rashio first meet at the royal palace. It's their second encounter, after which he falls in love with Nosha. It's also where the second male lead makes his first appearance. What should I do now? Nosha and Rashio are like enemies. Is it really okay to leave things like this? No, I deliberately messed things up back then. It would have been better to just leave it alone. Just then, Nashia's tutor walked in, and seeing her seemingly lost in personal matters, scolded her angrily. She said she only wanted to learn magic techniques from me for a short time, but now she's focused on other things. Natia quickly explained, No, that's not it. I was just thinking about something. So, her tutor's voice sharpened. I don't care what you're thinking about. Just remember this. Don't ruin my reputation at the academic conference. The mention of the conference caught Natia off guard. Haven't you heard from Matt yet? I'll be attending this academic conference. As a judge, the tutor's words echoed in Natia's mind. Don't ruin my reputation. You're attending the academic conference too? She asked, a flicker of surprise in her voice. Isn't it obvious? He retorted, then continued, his voice taking on a sharper edge. Do you really think you are just an ordinary person, Natia? You're a genius in the field of magic engineering. The word struck Natia like a physical blow, leaving her utterly stunned. Her tutor pressed on. I was afraid you'd become complacent, so I didn't want to say anything. That magic stone took me 10 years to complete. She created it just by looking at the book. She's qualified to participate in the academic conference. So, you mean you're having me participate in the academic conference to showcase my skills in magic engineering, right? Her tutor nodded, a smug look on his face. Exactly. I mean, with this. Natia's eyes fell on the blueprint, a sudden wave of panic washing over her as she realized her firearm design wasn't finished. I haven't completed this yet, she stammered. No need to complete it. Just showing them the kind of weapon I'm developing will be enough to shock them. Still slightly bewildered, Natia pressed further. Tutor, have you been planning this all along? Is this why you took me as your apprentice? At her words, her tutor's face flushed with irritation. What? You don't like it? I just wanted to show everyone the potential of magic technology. Nashia's mind raced. If that's the case, I should attend the academic conference too. Might as well see what happens there. A slow smile spread across her face. All right, I'll get started. Yes, I'll try to develop this weapon. Although I said I'm confident, a weapon made from a magic stone isn't something to be trifled with. Just like the magic light bracelet, it can only be used 3 times. A gun made from a magic stone is the same. After firing about 3 times, it becomes unusable. If I want to make a splash at the academic conference, I have to make those 3 shots count. Otherwise, the weapon's value decreases and there's no point in showcasing it. How can I increase its power? The scene shifted. Akin's voice suddenly called out from behind her. Miss, what are you thinking about, miss? If you keep walking like that, you'll bump into something. Nasia blinked, her focus returning to her surroundings. Thank you, Akin, she said, a hint of embarrassment in her voice. Akin tilted his head, a curious look on his face. Miss, did you meet with your tutor again? Nasia chuckled. The academic conference is coming up, so I'm a bit anxious. She paused, then added, Oh, and you have to prepare to attend the academic conference with me. Akin's eyebrows shot up in surprise. Me? Of course. Have you ever seen a needle run without its thread? Nashia's words left Akin momentarily speechless. He quickly recovered. Yes, I understand. Nasia laughed, a teasing lilt in her voice. What's this? Weren't you saying you didn't want to? Well, if Miss asks me to go with her, I don't have the right to refuse, do I? Anyway, I'm going to the professor's lab now. I know. Will Miss be going home early today? Akin asked, a hesitant note in his voice. Why? Nasia asked, puzzled. He hesitated for a moment, then continued. I heard that today is Madam's death anniversary. If Akin was referring to someone as Madam, it could only be the woman Orlon Rillo loved, her mother, Charlie Rona. If that was the case, then her father must be drunk by now. For what she had read in the original story, Nasia knew how Charlie had died. Where's my father? She asked Akin, her voice suddenly sharp. Meanwhile, her father was indeed drowning his sorrows, trying to lose himself in the numbing embrace of alcohol, to forget the ache in his heart. Orlon Rillo poured another drink, sitting silently in the darkened room. A treasured memento clutched in his hand, a picture of his late wife, Charlie Rona, the woman he could never forget. Though decades had passed, he still remembered vividly a bright summer day, when a lovely young girl had approached him. What's your name? It was the moment he first met Charlie, the daughter of a nanny. Goodness, Charlie, what did you say to the young master? The nanny immediately scolded. The boy walked over and patted her head, introducing himself as Orlon. He was 8 years old then, and Charlie was 5. They didn't quite understand social hierarchy, only stiffly using formal titles like young master, which the maids were obliged to use when adults were present. When it was just the two of them, they called each other by their names, Charlie and Orlon. Since they had been together since before they grew up, Charlie became a part of his memories, from a lovely childhood to a mischievous adolescence, until she blossomed into a beautiful young woman. He had always watched over all her beautiful faces. No one could talk to him like Charlie, and no one could make him as happy as she could. For a long time, he didn't realize his own feelings. One day, she suddenly said, maybe I'll get married. Orlon was surprised and asked again what. She continued, I'm old enough to get married now. My mother said I have to get married. Not long ago, I met the owner's son at the grocery store on the main street. Orlon was stunned. What was he hearing? Charlie was saying she would marry someone else, live with another man, have 2 children who looked like their parents, raise them together, and spend their lives together. He didn't know why, but deep down he felt so uneasy. Charlie also started to draw a line. He secretly went to the man and threatened him. If words didn't work, he wouldn't hesitate to use his power and authority. How could someone so insignificant compare to Charlie? But the one who stopped him was Charlie. Stop it, Orlon. Why are you suddenly saying this? You know you're threatening the man I'm seeing. If you're worried that I'll be unhappy in my marriage, that's enough. Stop it, Charlie. Thank you for worrying about me, but I want to make my own decisions. If you continue to interfere, I will have to politely decline. Charlie wasn't someone easily swayed. When people saw her resolute appearance, anyone would be captivated. It was only then that he realized what this frustration was. All the childish things he had done so far were for himself, because he felt uneasy. Orlan explained his previous actions. Charlie asked in surprise, "What? You can't live without me. The thought of you being with another man is unbearable. It breaks my heart, Charlie." Suddenly, "What are you saying? He likes you." "No, I'm in love with you." When she heard him say those words, she was genuinely taken aback. She immediately said, "Orlan, stop joking. It's not funny at all." "I'm not joking. I couldn't possibly joke about something like this." "Enough. I have to go now." "Wait, let go of me now." "Wait, Charlie, say something, please." Orlan was completely flustered. She continued without hesitation, "Do you really think we can be together? We're not children anymore." Just as Charlie said, they were no longer children. As Charlie and he grew up, he could clearly feel the difference in their status. So, as he looked into Charlie's eyes, he realized what he truly had to do. "Why have I been stopping Charlie like a fool?" Orlan reproached himself. "Charlie, wait for me. I'll become so powerful that no one will be able to say anything about our relationship." "Orlan," she cried out, sobbing. He continued in a determined voice that he would make the whole world acknowledge them. Orlan was resolute. "I promise, after inheriting the Rillo family, I will help the family become even more powerful in business and society." The Rillo family's rise, all of it, was just so he could marry Charlie without any obstacles. "Orlan, I know there are many people who want to marry you. If you choose someone as ordinary and humble as me, you'll regret it someday." "You're wrong, Charlie. If you don't choose me, you'll be the one to regret it." Their first kiss. In those days, he held her carefully in his arms, afraid she was too small, too fragile. Charlie looked breathtakingly beautiful in her wedding dress. Holding Nasia and Nosha in his arms, he felt like he had the whole world. There was nothing left to envy. He loved Charlie, married her, and had children with her. He thought he would grow old peacefully with Charlie, until one day, Charlie, covered in blood and trembling, called out, "Orlan, hold on. The doctor will be here soon." He had been away from home for a few days for work. An unidentified stranger had broken in and attacked Charlie. By the time he returned, it was all over. In that moment, she still tried to speak to him, to make him promise one thing. "Please take good care of Nasia and Nosha."